Chapter 841. In the past, the three great clans slaughtered the entire Qin people in one night. Not even a child or a chicken was spared. Today, I, Qin Hao, swear that within 2 hours, I will wash your entire wasteland with blood. Qin Hao clenched his fists as he stared at the auction stage, his eyes bloodshot. A life for a life, a debt must be repaid. This was an unchanging principle. Don't blame me for being ruthless and starting a massacre. However, the old demon had gone to search for Qin Yun and Huang Puhuichuan stone statues and had yet to return. Not to mention, he still had to save Duan Tianya and Duan Ruing. The auction continued. The Huangpu clan offers a set of mid-grade king armor, 3 silvers. The Dugu clan offers a top-grade saint sword, 1 Xian crystal. The Shimin clan has hoarded 5 years' worth of saint herbs, 1 copper coin. Please take it away. Dan Xian continued to speak on the stage. King armor, saint sword, immeasurable herbs, they were all sold off at the lowest possible price. During this time, he also threw out many treasures to the crowd. Anyone who managed to grab them would get it. These treasures were gathered by the 3 great clans with great effort, expending a lot of manpower and resources. Just based on the price, it was already astronomical. But now, the auctioneer that Hai Dafu and Jin Yushuan pointed out was given away for nothing. The auctioneer's actions were like that of a madman with mad cow disease. Not only that, some warriors from all over Xiliang also brought their family heirlooms to the auction, but in the end, their family heirlooms were also thrown into the crowd by Dan Xian. They came full of excitement, hoping that their family heirlooms would be sold at a shocking price, revitalizing their clans. They never thought that it would end up like this. The Yihong auction house suffered a great loss this time. As the guarantor, they suffered a great loss. And the Yihong auction house was backed by the 3 great clans. If they could not give an explanation, the warriors who provided the treasures would not let them off easily. Men, arrest this crazy old man for me. Representative Hai, Representative Jean, I hope you can give us a reasonable explanation. Shimin Gang couldn't bear it anymore. He couldn't let Dan Xian continue to cause trouble. He slapped the chair and flew up, landing majestically in front of Hai Dafu and Jin Yushuan, his eyes bloodshot from anger. If he didn't stop them, the cultivators who provided the treasures would have already blocked the backstage and were ready to chop them up. But just as Shimin Gang gave the order, Pil Xian suddenly disappeared from the stage. No one was able to clearly see how he disappeared. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air, disappearing in a flash. What is it? At this time, Hai Dafu rubbed his sleepy eyes and opened his eyes with a sleepy face. He raised his eyes and looked at Shimin Gang. Jin Yushuan was the same. When it came to acting, even 10 Hai Dafu couldn't compare to 1 Jin Yushuan. After all, back in the imperial mausoleum of Luo Shui, Jin Yushuan's incarnation as Great Emperor Jin could even scare an emperor-level powerhouse into wetting his pants. What's the situation? Being roared by Shimin Gang, Jin Yushuan suddenly woke up with a start. His expression was very shocked and puzzled. After all, Shimin Gang was standing in front of him, full of anger. His expression was so ferocious that he wanted to kill someone. Shimin Gang pointed to the auction stage. The first-class auctioneer you appointed really blinded old man's eyes. He's like a mad cow. Where is he? Shimin Gang was about to explain, but when he turned his head, Pil Xian was gone. Gone. Shimin Gang rubbed his eyes and patted his face. He woke himself up. He immediately looked at 9 solitary swords and Huangpu Quangzhan. The 2 of them were also dumbfounded. Pil Xian was still standing on the stage a second ago. When did he disappear? They really didn't know. It was like seeing a ghost. I overslept and the auction started. We didn't even know. I'm really sorry. Masterly, why don't you come out quickly and host the auction? Jin Yushuan pretended to be apologetic. He quickly got up and waved in the direction of the backstage. As he waved, a middle-aged man in a white robe walked out. He was full of righteousness. The middle-aged man also rubbed his eyes. He looked sleepy as if he had just woken up. However, from the aura he exuded, it was completely different from Pil Xian. People who often went in and out of the auction house could tell at a glance that this person was definitely an expert in auctions. Even an inadvertent subtle movement was at the level of a master. And this person was also an old acquaintance of Qin Hao. It was the host of the New Star competition held by the four major schools, the most famous Luo Shui imperial city, Big Mouth Li. Big Mouth Li was often the host of the royal family's competitions. However, people in the wasteland didn't know Big Mouth Li at all. So he looked like he was in his 40s, but Jin Yuxuan said he was more than 100 years old. Who knew? Maybe I'm not acclimatized. I was a little sleepy and took a nap. Big Mouth Li's acting skills were superb. When he came, Jin Yuxuan told him clearly that he was a super invincible almighty who had lived in seclusion in the mountains for many years. So Big Mouth Li stood in front of Shimin Gang at this time. Even if he fell asleep and made a mistake, he still acted very tall. This Shimin Gang was stunned. He stared blankly for a long time before he said stupidly, "Could it be that you are the auctioneer appointed by Councilman Jean and Councilman Hai?" Because the auctioneer was an almighty who lived in seclusion in the mountains, his status was very noble. So, when he came, even the leaders of the three major families didn't get to see him. It's the old man. Big Mouth Li had a straight face. Although he was as thin as a stick, he was very tall. He put his hands behind his back and acted to his heart's content. Clang! Huangpu Zhangquang and Duga 9 swords fell from their chairs. Could it be that the sloppy old man just now was fake? But how did that old man get in? No matter how he sneaked in, it was a big loss because of him this time. Elder Shimin Gang, is there anything else? Haitafu tidied his clothes and stood up. He seemed to be saying, "This time we are ready. The auction can start now." Nothing. Senior Li, please come on stage and host. Shimin Gang could only grit his teeth and swallow his anger. Even though his expression was extremely ugly, he still displayed a respectful appearance and waved his hand to invite Big Mouth Li. Okay. Big Mouth Li nodded and walked up the stage with steady steps. He took over Dan Xian's position. What should we do? Duga 9 swords frowned and looked at Huangpu Zhangquang. What else can we do? It's our negligence to let an old lunatic sneak in. When the leader blames us, no one can escape. We can only pay for the money we lost. Huangpu Zhangquang felt his heart ache, but he shook his head helplessly. In the crowd, Qin Hao saw everything clearly. He coldly sneered and joy rose in his heart. Then he looked at Big Mouth Li. Big Mouth Li nodded and said in a bureaucratic tone, "Everyone, please be quiet. I don't know what happened just now, but no matter what, please maintain your poise and order. This is the respect for the almighty god of auctions of the divine wilderness continent. Next, our auction will continue. First, we will sing a song." Chapter 842. What kind of song is this? It's so terrible. Others sing for money, but this auctioneer's singing is terrible, and his voice is like a duck's. Don't care what song it is, just sing along. The sooner you sing, the sooner you can end it. Otherwise, people will really die. Along with the discussion, the 100,000 people in the hall stood up at the same time, imitating Big Mouth Li with their left hand on their waist and their right hand shaking. "The god of auctions, I love you. The god of auctions, I love you." The singing continued for half an hour, and many people rolled their eyes as they sang. Now that the singing is over, the next 3 people will be auctioned. 2 king-level experts, and a woman with a primordial spirit. Big Mouth Li waved his hand and ordered the 3 aristocratic family guards to bring Duan Tianya, Elder Lifeng, and Duan Ring onto the stage. The audience heaved a sigh of relief and cheered wildly. The terrible singing ceremony was finally over, and right after it ended, the main event of the day began. At this moment, 100,000 pairs of eyes were fixed on the auction stage. Then, they saw Duan Tianya, who was wearing shackles and handcuffs, being escorted onto the stage by 6 shirtless men. Duan Tianya's condition was not good. His clothes were tattered, and there were patches of blood on his clothes. The blood had already dried up, indicating that he had suffered a lot of beatings. That mighty face was pale and weak to the extreme. His handcuffs and ankles were made of an unknown material that emitted a faint blue light. Every time the blue light flashed, Duan Tianya felt as if he was carrying a huge mountain on his back. His legs were bent under the pressure, and every step he took was difficult. If it weren't for the fact that they could vaguely see the fierce look in his eyes through his messy hair, everyone would have thought that he was a cripple. They wouldn't have been able to associate him with the high and mighty Broken Wave Gang leader. After Duan Tianya went onto the stage, he was followed by Elder Lai Feng and Duan Ruiying. Their condition was not much better than Duan Tianya's. The only difference was that Duan Ruiying had a humiliating dog collar around her neck. "Kneel down. You and that Qin bastard are not fit to stand." 6 bare-chested, burly men brought the men forward and divided them into 2 groups. Then they kicked the legs of Duan Tianya, Elder Lai Feng, and Duan Ruiying. Although the 3 of them gritted their teeth and held on, the vicious beatings during this period of time had already tortured them to the point where they did not even look human anymore. After being kicked twice, they involuntarily knelt on the ground, kneeling in front of 100,000 people. To the Heaven's End Cliff, this was a great humiliation. Ha ha! Heaven's End Cliff, you never thought that this day would come, right? Do you remember me? I'm a dog that you once slapped in the street. You dare to teach me a lesson for a few ordinary people? Today, I, your father, will buy your daughter home and let her have a taste of pleasure. This can also be considered as repayment. Thank you for slapping me. It's not your turn to buy it, Wong Go. Do you know me at Heaven's End Cliff? I'm Zhu Bolang. You cut off my arm. I've been waiting for this day for too long. I've even sold off the entire Flying Heavens Association just so that I can bid for you father and daughter today. Watch how I torture you. Heaven's End Cliff, I'm Wu Sigui. I want to buy you to wash the toilet. Heaven's End Cliff, I'm Lu Bang. Heaven's End Cliff, I'm Lu Bu Wei. The bidding price had not been announced yet, but the people below the stage were already scrambling to be the first to shout. Most of them were people who had a grudge against the Heaven's End Cliff. Be quiet, Big Mouthly said in a low voice. He coldly glanced at Duan Tianya and Duan Ruiying. He knew that these were the people that Qin Hao wanted to save. Although he was very anxious, his face was very cold. He suddenly took a step forward and pulled Duan Tianya's hair. "Raise your head and let me have a good look at you, you beast. I'll set a price for you." The moment he made his move, Li Dazui secretly stuffed a pill into Duan Tianya's mouth. "Don't make a sound. Refine this pill and expel the poison in your body." Saving people was simple, but it was not the right time. They had to wait for the old demon to find the stone statue. Therefore, this pill was to expel the poison in Duan Tianya's body and prevent him from suffering. Duan Tianya was stunned. He did not know Li Dazui. He was absent-minded for a moment. Then, he seemed to understand something and secretly nodded. And not bad. After stuffing the pill, Li Dazui praised. "Look at your determined face. Look at your body, thighs, and arms. You're strong and powerful. Buying you as a dog slave to protect your master is very suitable." Hearing Li Dazui's evaluation, Shiman Gang and the other 2 were overjoyed. He was indeed an authentic auctioneer. At this moment, they recognized Li Dazui's identity and no longer doubted him. Next, Li Dazui continued to test Elder Lai Feng and Duan Ruiying. Using the same method, he secretly gave them the antidote. No matter what kind of poison they were suffering from, it could be cured. The antidote's formula was provided by Qin Hao. It was personally refined by Dan Gu, a New Moon Emperor-level alchemist. Unless the poisons of the 3 aristocratic families surpassed the Emperor level. But obviously, that was impossible. And not bad. It's just that this old man is a little older. Now, let's start the auction. The starting price for the old man is 2 million Xian crystals. The starting price for Duan Tianya is 1 million Xian crystals. As for Duan Tianya's daughter, the starting price is 800,000 Xian crystals. Li Dazui gave a very reasonable price. Then he suddenly turned to look at Shiman Gang and the other 2. "Elders, if anyone is willing to bid for Duan Tianya and his daughter, can you give everyone a discount?" "Of course. Our clan leader has already instructed. Masterly, you can do as you see fit." Shiman Gang replied loudly, grinning from ear to ear. Elder Lai Feng's cultivation was not as strong as Duan Tianya's. Moreover, he was old and had been tortured for a long time. No one knew how long he could live. In terms of price, it was naturally a far cry from Duan Tianya's. Duan Tianya was an 8th-level martial king and was in the prime of his life. Given his ability and aptitude, if the buyer was willing to sacrifice a lot of treasures to nurture him, he might be able to advance to the venerate level. A Yuan venerate slave was simply too honorable. As for Duan Ruiying, she had an essence soul and had greater potential. But currently, she was far from being comparable to Duan Tianya. She was only a martial sage. In that case, if anyone bids for Duan Tianya and his daughter at the same time, regardless of the highest price, there will be a rebate of 300,000 Xin crystals. Consider it a discount from the 3 aristocratic families. Now let's begin. Lita Zue smiled and moved away. I offer 2 million Xin crystals to buy this pair of father and daughter. A middle-aged fat man from the western Zhao nation shouted at the top of his lungs. Judging from his attire and the row of strong men standing behind him, he must be someone of high status. There was an 80% chance that he had a high status in the western Zhao nation. Even so, this person was very excited. After all, Duan Tian, you had a chance to advance to the venerate level. A venerate level expert was definitely considered a top figure in Western Liang. I offer 2,500,000 Xian crystals. Prince Zhao Kuo, I'm sorry, but I've also taken a fancy to Duan Tianya. As for his daughter, I'm also prepared to nurture her well and bestow her to be my personal bodyguard. Chapter 843. Personal bodyguard, protecting the master in bed in the middle of the night. Our bodies must be close to each other, huh? The man in golden armor looked up and laughed. He looked at Duan Ruiying and licked his lips. Nalan Ertai. Zhao Kuo gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. The man in golden armor was not inferior to him. He was the prince of the Nalan royal family. In recent years, the emperor, Nalan Zhenggang, was not in the mood to govern because of the empress' illness. Nalan Ertai controlled all the affairs of the country, and he also had military power. Therefore, Nalan Ertai's position was higher than Zhao Kuo's. Are you trying to go against me? I bid 3 million earth crystals to get the father and daughter of Duan Tian Cliff. Zhao Kuo roared. Fight to the end was written all over his face. He did not have any real power like Nalan Ertai. Therefore, he was in need of experts like Duan Tian Cliff. 3,500,000. You want to compete with me? You are not worthy. Nalan Ertai raised his head proudly and shouted out the price again. The competition between the two princes caused many people to sigh. Many people who wanted to bid for Duan Tian Cliff stopped. No matter how strong the martial artist families were, they were not as strong as the imperial family. It was unwise to challenge the princes. At this time, a sarcastic snort came from the area where the Shimin clan disciples were. It was from a young man. He did not like Nalan Ertai and Zhao Kuo. Qin Hao looked at him secretly. He found that this person looked similar to Shimin Gang on the stage. He was most likely a relative of Shimin Gang. 6th young master, our target is Qin Yun's halberd. Don't waste your money on useless people by fighting with 2 princes. Beside the young man, a henchman who looked like a butler advised. The young man nodded and swallowed the anger in his heart. He wanted to wait for Qin Yun's halberd to appear before bidding. This was his grandfather's instruction. His grandfather was Shimin Gang. 3,800,000. 4,500,000. 4,800,000. Nalan Ertai and Zhao Kuo were still competing. The price was rising crazily. Everyone was shocked. Some people patted their chest and rejoiced that they did not bet with the 2 princes. They cannot afford it. At this moment, the disciples of the 3 aristocratic families also chose to remain silent. It seemed that the father and daughter of Duan Tian Cliff would fall into the hands of the 2 princes. This caused the enemies of the heavens in Cliff to shake their heads and sigh incessantly. Once the heavens in Cliff fell into the hands of the Grand Dukes, it would be difficult for them to take revenge. Puff! Suddenly, Zhao Kuo spat out a mouthful of blood. After hearing Nalan Ertai's high price of 5 million earth crystals, he staggered and almost fell down. Fortunately, he was caught by the guard behind him. Zhao Kuo angrily pointed at Nalan Ertai and then lowered his head, feeling extremely frustrated. He was powerless. 5 million earth crystals was far beyond what he could afford. He was still no match for Nalan Ertai. Haha, what's wrong, Zhao Kuo? Of Zhao, compared to this prince, your Western Ways prince is just a pile of dung. You are not my opponent at all. Although he looked pleased with himself, his heart was pained. 5 million earth crystals was equivalent to 10 million Xian crystals. The price was indeed a bit high, but he felt good about defeating Zhao Kuo. Then, he excitedly swept his gaze across the audience and shouted provocatively, "Who dares to compete with me? Who dares to compete with me? Who dares to compete with me?" After 3 shouts, the crowd was silent. No one answered. In that case, the father and daughter of Duan Tian Cliff belong to me. Nalan Ertai impatiently waved his hand and ordered the guards to bring Duan Tian Cliff and Duan Ruing back. He could not wait to pounce on Duan Ruing. In this regard, many cultivators with righteous hearts shook their heads and sighed. The father and daughter of Duan Tian Cliff were pitiful. They were king-level martial artists, but they could not even protect their daughter. He should not have made the 3 aristocratic families his enemy. Protecting the Qin family was Duan Tian Cliff's biggest failure in his life. 10 million earth crystals. The 2 guards sent by Nalan Ertai did not even have time to lift their feet. Suddenly, a heroic voice reverberated from a certain corner of the auction house, causing everyone present to jump up in shock. Nalan Ertai's face changed as if he had been hit in the head. As for Zhao Kuo, who had lost the bid, he almost fainted. 10 million earth crystals? That was 100 million earth crystals. What a big deal. Which family was it? How dare they challenge the Nalan royal family of Western Wei? Everyone could not help but look in the direction of the voice. They saw that the person who shouted 10 million earth crystals was a young man, about 20 years old. Although he was not dressed luxuriously, the 2 strands of white hair on his forehead were particularly eye-catching. Where did this person come from? He is so generous. I don't know. Maybe he's a disciple of a big family in the Luo Shui Empire. Only people from the Luo Shui Empire have the ability to shout 10 million earth crystals. But so what? Challenging the Nalan royal family is stupid. The father and daughter of Duan Tian Cliff won't be able to leave the wasteland. They will definitely be killed by the Nalan royal family, unless this young man has the support of the Luo Shui royal family. The crowd discussed and began to speculate about Qin Hao's identity. Qin Hao had successfully aroused their curiosity. At this moment, Duan Tian Cliff, Elder Lai Feng, and Duan Ruing looked at Qin Hao's position at the same time. After a glance, the 3 of them were so excited that they shed tears of excitement. When Qin Hao came to Qin State, he used the 9 Suns Array to treat Duan Ruing's cold disease and successfully turned the ice bird into a soul. At that time, Qin Hao was using his original body. Duan Tian Cliff and the others recognized him at this moment. Although compared to before, Qin Hao had lost a lot of childishness and 2 strands of white hair, his calm aura was still the same. Seeing an old acquaintance appear, how could Duan Tian Cliff not be excited? At first, he felt strange. Why did Li Dazhou, who was not related to him, want to help him detoxify? Now it seemed that he must have been ordered by Qin Hao. And Qin Hao was obviously here to save people. In fact, not only Duan Tian Cliff was paying attention to Qin Hao, everyone in the audience was paying attention, including the absent-minded Nalan Ertai and Shimin Gang on the stage. Shimin Gang did not know Qin Hao, but the other party's voice seemed to be similar. He racked his brains, but could not remember for a while. In his memory, there was no white-haired martial artist with this voice. After all, Qin Hao's current appearance was easy to remember. "Kid, who are you?" Nalan Ertai shouted angrily after being absent-minded. "What does it have to do with you?" In response, Qin Hao responded coldly. "Presumptuous. How dare you? Kid, you're too arrogant." Without waiting for an explanation, Nalan Ertai's guards drew their swords. 3 of them had already rushed to Qin Hao's position, ready to cut him into pieces. Is this the order of the Yihong auction house? Qin Hao did not dodge, nor did he make a move. He stood in the same place and smiled casually. All of you stop. In the next moment, before Shimin Gang and the others could get angry, Nailan Ertai had already stopped his guards. This auction was extremely grand. Openly killing people on the spot was going against the three big families. Although Nailan Ertai was not afraid of the three big families, this was their territory after all. There was a saying that a strong dragon could not suppress a snake in its own territory. Kid, you're so bold. Congratulations, you've successfully attracted my attention and made me look at you differently. You must be proud and excited of yourself, right? After all, you'll be put in an important position by me. I'll allow you to be one of my men. At this time, Nailan Ertai took 2 deep breaths, his sly eyes flashed, and suddenly laughed a few times. Chapter 844. What's the point of continuing to pretend? Admit it. I guess that you're a disciple of a small family in our Wei state. You probably can get an important position in your family, so you appeared at the Yihong auction house and challenged me. Isn't it to attract my attention? Now congratulations, you have succeeded. I appreciate your courage and painstaking strategy. After the auction, report to my prince's residence, and I will give you a position. Nailan Ertai explained wishfully. After listening to his explanation, the audience also suddenly realized. So that's how it is. This kid spent so much effort to show his face in front of Prince Nailan for his own future. This person is quite smart. Why didn't I come up with such a good idea? Some people sighed. It was a very glorious thing to have a relationship with the Prince of Wei State. Your idea is very good. Congratulations, you took a shortcut and saved 50 years of hard work. One of the 3 big men who rushed to Qin Hao even laughed and reached out to pat Qin Hao on the shoulder. Get lost. Yi Shuihan stood beside Qin Hao and took the lead to hit the man's chest with his palm. Pung! The powerful palm force threw the man 10 feet into the air, breaking all his bones and tendons. His chest was smashed into mud. After falling into the crowd, the big guy who attacked smashed an unlucky old landlord to death. Then, with 2 more strikes, he died. Although this person was Nailan Ertai's guard, he had the cultivation of a profound sage. In great way, he could be regarded as an elite. However, Yi Shuihan was a king realm master. After the battle at Xingyue Academy, and after being trained by Yulong Yuan, his current realm was even higher than Qin Hao's. Even 1,000 of Nailan Ertai's men were definitely not Yi Shuihan's opponent. What? Murder? Boom! There was another commotion in the audience. No one would have thought that Qin Hao didn't come alone, but with a helper. The helper didn't say anything and directly killed Prince Nailan's guard. Killing someone in the Yihong auction house. Weren't they afraid that the 3 great clans would kill them? Everyone has seen it. It was this person who tried to murder my young master. As a guard, it is my duty to protect my young master. And Prince Nailan, don't flatter yourself. Who do you think you are? Are you worthy of being my young master's subordinate? You don't even have the qualifications to carry his shoes. Heaven's End Cliff's father and daughter, my young master will definitely bid for them. After Yi Shuihan finished killing, he clapped his hands with a relaxed expression. His confession made Shimin Gang and the other 2 unable to find any reason to suppress him. Damn it, bastard. Nailan Ertai's other guards were furious. They were soldiers and had a deep relationship with the dead big guy. Get back here. Nailan Ertai roared hoarsely, stopping the guards from rioting. His eyes were filled with a thick murderous aura. He stared at Qin Hao fiercely, feeling as if he had been slapped in the face by the other party. This young man was actually not here to curry favor with him. Very good, very good. I don't care who you are. In short, you have provoked me. But I don't want to bicker with you now. You'd better cooperate and take the initiative to withdraw from the auction. Nailan Ertai pointed at Qin Hao. What if I don't cooperate? Qin Hao asked back. Not only will I not cooperate, but I will also continue to increase the price. In my opinion, faction leader Duan and Miss Ruing are not things that can be measured with money. 1 million earth crystals. Between the words, Qin Hao increased the price by 2 million. Squeak! Suddenly, Nalan Ertai's face twisted fiercely, and his fists were almost bleeding. In Dawei, it had always been others who flattered him and catered to him. But no one was like Qin Hao, who did not know how to appreciate his kindness and still went against him. 1,000,000 earth crystals was like a huge mountain, pressing down on Nalan Ertai so hard that he could not raise his head. The price was a bit too high. Perhaps it was still within his acceptable range, but if he wasted all his money on bidding for the Heaven's End Cliff, it would destroy Nalan Ertai's big plan of rebellion. The main purpose of his visit this time was to buy the Divine Soldier and arm his personal army to overthrow Nalan Zhenggang's regime. Anyway, Nalan Zhengang was depressed and had lost his fighting spirit because of the Empress' illness. Fine, you have guts. Let's ride a donkey and read a songbook. Just wait and see. Nalan Ertai threatened and withdrew from the auction unwillingly. Congratulations to this young master for obtaining a servant who is about to step into the venerable level and a potential female servant with a soul essence. How about this? We give this useless old man as a gift to this young master. What do you think, Elder Shiman? On the stage, Big Mouth Li cooperated with the performance. The old man he mentioned was Elder Lifephone. No problem. Shiman Gang nodded with satisfaction. Elder Lifephone was not worth much, and no one would buy him. It was better to give him to Qin Hao. After all, Qin Hao bid 1,000,000 earth crystal stones, which greatly exceeded Shiman Gang's budget. He waved his hand and took the initiative to send the Heaven's End Cliff, Duan Ruing, and Elder Lifephone to Qin Hao, together with the antidote. As for the antidote, Qin Hao did not use it at all. He was very clear that this could not be the real antidote. Heaven's End Cliff, don't think that you and your daughter can escape because you did not fall into my hands. I think the backer you found is useless. He dared to offend Prince Nalan. He must be tired of living. So please remember me, Zhu Bolong. Remember me, Lu Bang. And me, Lu Buwei. We will make you and your daughter live a life worse than death. In the distance, the enemies of the Heaven's End Cliff cursed and waved their fists threateningly at Qin Hao. If Nalan Ertai bought the Heaven's End Cliff, these enemies would naturally not dare to retaliate. But now it was different. They believed that Qin Hao could not protect the Heaven's End Cliff. In fact, Qin Hao could not even protect himself. So, this hatred must be avenged. Everyone, don't worry. I guarantee that this person will not be able to leave the wasteland alive. So when the auction is over, please help me take down that white-haired boy and his guards. This prince promises that you can take turns to enjoy Duan Ruing. Of course, the first person to enjoy it must be this prince. At this time, Nalan Ertai also patted his chest and promised. Thank you for your kindness, Prince. We will definitely go through fire and water. We will definitely let that white-haired boy die a horrible death. Wang Go, Zhu Bolong, and the others immediately ran to Nalan Ertai's side and stood in his camp. At this time, everyone also felt extremely honored. If they could hug Nalan Ertai's thigh, then in the future, when they go away, it was equivalent to having an absolute backer. For these provocations, Qin Hao did not pay attention to them and did not even bother to look at them. In Qin Hao's eyes, Nalan Ertai and Zhu Bolong were equivalent to dead people. Benefactor. At the Heaven's End Cliff, Duan Ruing and Elder Lifephone were nervous. They could feel that there were king-stage experts around Nalan Ertai. If they really fought, they might not be able to defeat them. After all, the Heaven's End Cliff and the rest had suffered serious injuries, which greatly affected their combat strength. At this time, they were filled with guilt, thinking that they were a burden to Qin Hao. Don't be nervous. Just focus on refining the antidote pill in your body. Later, you will personally go and give Zhu Bolong and Wang Go a surprise, because today, the 3 aristocratic families will be removed from the wasteland. Qin Hao said coldly. Beside him, Han Man and Xiaogua grinned, their eyes burning with a fierce battle intent. Thump! The Heaven's End Cliff trio's hearts skipped a beat, and they looked at each other. They noticed that besides Yi Shui Han, there were 2 other bodyguards beside Qin Hao. About 500 martial artists, including Qin Hao, all had a strange look in their eyes. What was more shocking was that the cultivation level of any one of them was at the Yuan King stage. Suddenly, Heaven's End Cliff had an impulse to faint. His intuition told him that these 500 Yuan Kings were all Qin house subordinates. This discovery was too shocking. Chapter 845. The auction continued. What followed was still the highlight of the show. Qin Yun's halberd. This halberd had a glorious battle record. It had drunk the blood of countless famous experts in the wasteland. It was once the nightmare of the three great families. Moreover, Qin Yun himself was a legend in the wasteland. His weapon made people yearn for it. Whoever had it would prove that they were a hero of their generation. Back then, Qin Yun had been petrified at Broken Dragon Cliff, and the halberd had been obtained by the three great families. However, no one dared to take the halberd for themselves. Today, it would be auctioned to the highest bidder. In an instant, the descendants of the three great families rubbed their palms together. They could no longer hold back their impatience. Qin Yun's halberd was of great significance to them. After all, the heirs of the three great families were all dead. Whoever obtained Qin Yun's halberd would undoubtedly increase their reputation in the family. Therefore, the descendants of the Shimin, Huangpu, and Dugu families were determined to obtain it. However, compared to the Huangpu and Dugu families, the Shimin family's descendants were obviously more competitive. After all, the Shimin family had always had a hobby of collecting divine soldiers' weapons. The Huangpu family was obsessed with alchemy. As for the Dugu family, they prefer to make friends everywhere and build connections everywhere. Grandpa told me again and again that I must get this halberd. Shimin Gang's grandson, Shimin Tai, secretly clenched his fists. His eyes flashed with a burning light. Shimin Gang had seriously warned him that he must obtain Qin Yun's halberd. If he obtained it, coupled with Shimin Gang's influence in the family, Shimin Tai would most likely become the new patriarch. Present the halberd. At this moment, Li Dazui shouted. 8 burly men carried the halberd from the backstage and walked up to the auction stage with great difficulty. Every step they took left a crack in the ground. The 8 burly men's bodies flashed with a strong orange light. Without a doubt, they were all peak sky saints. It was hard to imagine how heavy it was for 8 sky saints to carry a halberd. Clang! Along with the clanging sound, the 8 giants exerted their strength at the same time, removing the halberds from their shoulders and throwing them on the stage. At this moment, the halberd seemed to have a mind of its own. It was as if it had transformed into Qin Yun himself. It would rather die than fall. As it stood upright, the bottom of the halberd forcibly pierced a huge hole in the sturdy auction stage. Endless cold beams also burst out from the halberd blade, releasing a surging, domineering aura. What a mighty and unyielding divine soldier! Li Dazue could not help but exclaim. This time, he wasn't putting on an act. He was genuinely amazed. Subconsciously, he couldn't help but reach out to touch it. But before his fingers could touch the halberd, it caused a strong repulsion from the halberd, and a buzzing sound came from it. Li Dazue's face suddenly tensed up, and he took a few steps back. The murderous aura was too strong. Even with his king-level cultivation, he could not resist it. At this moment, he truly admired the original owner of the halberd. Nodding his head, Li Dazue studied the halberd seriously for a while. He gestured at the halberd with his hand and said, "It's 10 feet and 6 inches long. Based on the weight of the heavenly saint stone, it's about 50,000 kilograms. It's a high-grade king weapon, but I can't tell what material it is made of. It should be mixed with a lot of mysterious pin divine iron. Only a peerless expert who is good at using halberds can wield it. Also, his cultivation must not be lower than the 6th level of the king level. Also, I have good news to tell everyone. It's a divine soldier that has not been carved with any inscriptions. It has huge potential." Almost immediately, Li Dazue finished describing the extraordinary aspects of the halberd. His words caused an uproar in the audience. 10 feet and 6 inches, which was more than 3 meters. Only a tall and strong man could wield the halberd with an imposing aura. The martial artist cultivation must not be lower than the 6th level of the king level. Just these two conditions alone were enough to make martial artists below the king level, who were less than 2 meters tall, sigh. Qin Hao, who was in the crowd, looked at the halberd erected on the stage. His eyes were hazy, as if he was looking at Qin Yun again. It was also as if he was looking at the scene of Qin Yun fighting the 3 peak Yuan monarchs at the top of the Broken Dragon Cliff that night. Don't worry, old cousin. Your weapon belongs to you only. I won't let anyone touch it. Qin Hao said silently. The starting price is 3 million earth crystal stones. Let the bidding begin. Li Dazue said and retreated to the side. This price was quite reasonable. The halberd was a high-grade king-level weapon and could be compared to a high-level king-level elite. Moreover, it was extremely difficult for a martial artist to obtain a suitable divine soldier. A weapon represented a martial artist's dignity and even his life. Therefore, it was completely reasonable for the halberd's price to be higher than the Broken Dragon Cliff. 3 million. I, Huangpu Wenhua, will take this halberd. Huangpu Wenhua was the grandson of Huangpu Quanzhan. He was also the most competitive successor of the family after Huangpu Daqi's death. What a joke. You want to take Qin Yun's divine soldier for 3 million? I'll bid 3,200,000. Shimin Taiding stood up. He had been waiting for this moment, so he spoke without hesitation. The younger generation of the Duga family started to whisper to each other. No one knew what they were discussing, but most of them were shaking their heads. It was obvious that they were not going to participate in the bidding. Although they also wanted Qin Yun's halberd, the Duga family had always been short of financial resources. They knew very well that even if they borrowed money from the merchant union, they might not be able to compete with Shimin Taiding and Huangpu Wenhua, especially since the Huangpu family was good at alchemy and did not lack money. I'm also quite interested in this halberd. This king has never liked to waste time. Fixed price, 5 million earth crystals. Nalen Ertai spoke again. He stood up and stretched out 5 fingers towards the auction stage. His face was full of confidence. He directly raised the price of the halberd to the same price as Zhao Qua. 5 million earth crystal stones was not a small number. It immediately made Huangpu Wenhua and Shimin Tai feel the pressure. Prince Nalen, you came from afar. Don't you know that guests should follow the host's wishes? At this time, Shimin Tai looked at Nalen Ertai with a cold face. He had been unhappy with this person since the auction of the Broken Dragon Cliff. There was a strong smell of gunpowder in his words, hinting that the other party should not compete with him. You can't say that. Since you are publicly auctioning a treasure, what's the difference between a guest and a host? We are all bidders. If you don't agree, you can increase the price. Nalen Ertai chuckled. Obviously, he would not give up easily. Very well, as you wish. I'll pay 6 million earth crystal stones. Shimin Tai would never give up. 6,500,000. I said, I want this halberd. Huangpu Wenhua slapped his thigh and looked relaxed. 6,800,000. Nalen Ertai roared, releasing the majesty of a prince. Just now, he had lost face when he bid with Qin Hao. This time, someone wanted to slap his face, but he did not agree. Creak. Shimin Tai clenched his fist and turned to look at Shimin Gang on the stage as if he was asking for his opinion. Shimin Gang nodded secretly. His eyes were firm as if he was saying, get it at all costs. This halberd is the key to the rise of our family. 7 million earth crystal stones. After getting Shimin Gang's reply, Shimin Tai's confidence doubled. He stood on the chair crazily and shouted in public. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Chapter 846. Shimin Gang, it should be your idea for your grandson to shout such a crazy price, right? Shimin Gang, you are really capable. Huangpu Quanzhan saw his grandson being suppressed, but he was not anxious. He smiled coldly and glanced at Shimin Gang on the chair next to him. So what if it's my idea? In order to let Tyre become the heir of the Shimin family, even if I have to sell myself, I must bid for Qin Yun's halberd. As for whether I have the ability or not, you don't have to worry about it. Shimin Gang answered with a sullen face. What a bastard. Nalen Ertai was so angry that his face turned red in the audience. 7 million earth crystals had exceeded the bottom line of what he could pay. This time, he was likely to be slapped in the face again. For a prince, it was an extremely shameful thing. "Prince, please calm down. For the sake of the plan, you must endure this." At this time, a dark-faced old man next to him reminded him. He couldn't waste money on a weapon. The batch of Saint Soul pills was more important. With the Saint Soul pills, Nayland Urtai could instantly create a large number of saints, which was his trump card to overthrow Nayland Lee's parents. "Okay, I'll endure it. I'll withdraw from the auction." Nayland Urtai was so angry that he sat back down. At this moment, he seemed to think of something. He looked at Qin Hao's position and shouted across the air, "Boy, don't you have a lot of money? Call out another 10 million and see if you can, huh?" Nayland Urtai couldn't afford it. He thought that Qin Hao couldn't afford it this time either. He was unhappy and wanted to make Qin Hao unhappy. Qin Hao chose to ignore his provocation, because no matter what the final price was, the halberd would fall into Qin Hao's hands. Qin Hao wouldn't even pay a copper coin to the three great families. I really didn't expect that even the rich boy who defeated Prince Nayland didn't dare to participate in the auction this time. I thought he really dared to call out another 10 million. Do you think he's the god of wealth who has too much money to spend? If he dares to shout, I'll eat shit. Zhu Bolong, Wang Go, Liu Bang, and a few others also made undisguised sarcastic remarks towards Qin Hao. Daring to buy the Heaven's End cliff was equivalent to going against them. At this moment, Shimentai deliberately glanced at Qin Hao. His eyes were full of mockery, as if to say, "You idiot, spending money on a cripple at the Heaven's End cliff. In the end, the divine soldier is right in front of you, but you can't even compete with me." 7,500,000. While Qin Hao was silent, Huangpu Wenhua suddenly raised the price again. Nayland Urtai and Shimen Tai didn't expect this, and their expressions were very surprised. "I've said it before, this halberd is mine." Huangpu Wenhua smiled and patted his thigh leisurely with a relaxed look on his face. Calling out a high price of 7.5 million was like drinking cold water. As expected of someone who came from an alchemist clan, Huangpu Wenhua, "Are you going against me?" Shimen Tai angrily shouted and pointed at the other party. "Brother Tai, why do you say that? As everyone knows, the three big families of the wasteland are united. How could I dare to go against you? I just want to collect Qin Yun's weapon. After all, I don't have the ability to use it. To me, it's just a waste, ha." Huangpu Wenhua laughed unscrupulously. He was extremely arrogant. He didn't have the ability to use it, but he bought it as a waste. This was undoubtedly a slap to Shimen Tai's face. "Tai continue to bid for old man." Shimen Gang was infuriated. He snorted and cursed Huangpu Quangzhan in his heart. 8 million. Shimen Tai's forehead was sweating, and he shouted, 8,500,000. Huangpu Wenhua raised the price unscrupulously, and at the same time, he kept throwing flirtatious glances at the beautiful female warriors in the crowd. The female cultivators' faces immediately flushed red, and they took the initiative to move closer to him, showing a coquettish attitude that allowed him to do whatever he wanted. This scene caused many people to be envious, and they sighed that the life of the rich was really good. I will call out the last number. Huangpu Wenhua, if you dare to follow, Qin Yun's halberd will be yours. I'm just afraid that you don't dare. 18 million. Shimen Tai was going crazy, and he shouted out a shocking price. As soon as the price was called out, the warriors in the crowd were so scared that they fell to the ground. 18 million. It was much higher than Qin Hao's bid of 12 million. The highest grade king weapons in the market would not exceed 8 million. Even if Qin Yun's halberd was not ordinary, it would at most be 9 million. Shimen Tai had shouted twice as much. Was he crazy? In fact, he was really going crazy. 18 million was his limit. His grandfather's wealth was actually only around 12 million. So if he wanted to buy Qin Yun's halberd, he would have to borrow money from Haidafu and Jin Yushuan. Others borrowing money was nothing. But as a descendant of the Shimen family, borrowing money was a disgrace. Huangpu Wenhua was also shocked, and he could no longer maintain his casual expression. He suddenly stood up and looked at Shimin Tai in disbelief. However, Huangpu Wenhua gave him a look. Huangpu Wenhua's nervousness was instantly swept away, and he regained his casual expression. He raised a finger and said, "As you wish, I will follow. 20 million. Rumble." The warriors in the crowd were shocked. 20 million earth crystals. Huangpu Wenhua was even crazier than Shimin Tai. 2 Yuan monarchs could be created from 20 million earth crystals if the spirit Qi was absorbed by a sage. Shimin Tai felt something sweet in his throat, and he almost vomited blood. He anxiously shouted at Shimin Gang, "Grandfather, Tai, let's give up." At this point, Shimin Gang had no choice but to give up. No matter what, he did not have the ability to beat 20 million earth crystals. Even if he sold a peak Yuan monarch like him to the Merchant Union, there was an 80% chance that Hai Dafu would not accept it. Huangpu Wenhua, F*CKU. You win. Shimin Tai cursed angrily as he secretly tore the corner of his shirt. However, since his grandfather had said that he would give up, he did not dare to disobey. However, when he cursed, Huangpu Wenhua, who was on the stage, almost jumped up. Huangpu Wenhua's grandmother was Huangpu Wenhua's wife. "I really did not expect Brother Wenhua to be so generous as to bid 20 million earth crystals." Shimin Gang snorted in dissatisfaction. He did not understand where Huangpu Wenhua's confidence came from. Even if the Huangpu family made a lot of money from refining pills, he firmly believed that Huangpu Wenhua would not be able to fork out 20 million earth crystals. Well, Huangpu Wenhua smiled meaningfully and glanced at Hai Dafu and Jin Yushuan. "Oh, I'm sorry. We gave him the confidence. Yesterday, Elder Wenhua borrowed 50 million earth crystals from the Merchant Union in advance." Ha ha ha. Hai Dafu and Jin Yushuan looked at each other and laughed while slapping their thighs. Uffed. Shimin Gang spat out a mouthful of blood and said with a trembling face, 60 million earth crystals? He could not believe that Huangpu Wenhua would take out such a huge loan. Could the Huangpu family repay it? Could it be? Shimin Gang suddenly realized that the loan was so huge. It was obviously for the Saint Soul Elixir. I believe you've guessed it. That's right. The Huangpu family is using this huge sum of money to buy the Saint Soul Elixir. In fact, our patriarch personally requested it from Councilman Hai and Councilman Jin when he hosted the banquet last night. The 2 councilmen agreed without hesitation. Huangpu Wenhua explained. In order to suppress the Dugu and Shimin families and dominate the wasteland, they had secretly given Hai Dafu many benefits. I see. Shimin Gang shook his head dispiritedly. No matter how meticulous he was, he had lost in dealing with relationships. He had to admit that the patriarch of the Shimin family was not good at handling matters. 30 million earth crystals. Suddenly, just as Huangpu Berserker was feeling complacent, an unexpected voice broke the silence. It came from the audience seats again. The moment it was heard, Huangpu Wenhua, the grandson of Huangpu Wenhua, fell to the ground in shock. Chapter 847. The family had borrowed 60 million from the Merchant Union, and most of it was used to bid for the Saint Soul pill. For Qin Yun's halberd, taking out 20 million was the limit. Qin Hao, on the other hand, added another 10 million and raised the price to 30 million. Are you trying to kill me? Even if you're a descendant of the Huangpu family, you can't just break the rules of the auction house. Qin Hao's lips curled into a cold smile as he looked at the murderous Huangpu Wenhua. This was a reminder to the other party. Huangpu Wenhua was startled and immediately calmed down. He secretly looked at the auction stage. On the stage, Shimin Gang and Duga Nine Sword were staring at him with a serious face. Obviously, they would not let the Huangpu family do whatever they wanted. Moreover, Huangpu Wenhua and Shimin Gang's grandson had a bad relationship just now. Of course, as a descendant of the Huangpu family, I will not make things difficult for any of the friends here. But I would like to give you a piece of advice. Don't touch things that you're not qualified to own. It will only bring you disaster. Huangpu Wenhua used a threatening tone and deliberately looked at Yishu Han, who was beside Qin Hao. Yi Shuihan had crippled Nalan Ertai's sky saint bodyguard with one palm strike. He should be a Yuan king. Judging from his age, Yi Shuin's rank was definitely not high. Therefore, Qin Hao's Yuan king bodyguard was useless to the Huangpu family. Also, the wasteland is a place of chaos. The law and order are not good. There are often bandits robbing. You have bid for such a valuable item. If you do not have the support of the local forces, it will be difficult for you to leave the wasteland. Huangpu Wenhua smiled sinisterly. On the surface, his family would not rob Qin Hao. But if bandits really attacked Qin Hao, who knew if it was the Huangpu family who did it? Old man agrees. So little brother below the stage, old man saw that you are talented and have a strange hairstyle. He has a good impression of you. It would be better if you join our Shiman clan. I can guarantee that you will be safe and sound in abandoned land. When Shiman Gang heard this, he was immediately overjoyed. His old eyes lit up, and he took the initiative to express his goodwill to Qin Hao. I, Solitary Nine Swords, also have a good impression of you, little brother. Moreover, I have a deep understanding of hairstyles. I feel that little brother's hairstyle has the potential to be improved. Why don't you join our Dugu clan and stay for a few days to study the art of hairdressing together? Nine Solitary Swords was not willing to be left behind. Both of them expressed their goodwill to Qin Hao at the same time, which made Huangpu, Wenhua, and Nalan Ertai very anxious. But in the next second, they laughed. I'm sorry, but I'm good at an extraordinary dog-beating fist technique, which is quite effective against bandits who have transformed into wild dogs. You don't have to worry about my safety. If no one raises the price, I'll take the halberd. Qin Hao flatly refused and gestured for Yi Shuihan to retrieve the halberd. Ha ha! Before Shiman Gang and Nine Solitary Swords could get angry, Nalan Ertai burst into laughter. He was really afraid that Qin Hao would agree. If he had the protection of the Shiman clan and Dugu clan, even Nalan Ertai would not be able to take revenge, let alone the people from the Huangpu clan. Qin Hao did not know how to appreciate favors and openly rejected the goodwill of two peak Yuan monarchs. This was simply courting death. However, Nalan Ertai did not think that even if Qin Hao joined, he would not be able to protect his life. The goodwill of the Shiman clan and Dugu clan was fake. Their real intention was to seize the halberd. At that time, Qin Hao would not even know how he died. This brat thinks too highly of himself. He actually dares to reject the goodwill of two elders. He boasted that he's good at the dog-beating fist technique. Wango, could it be that he's deliberately targeting you? Zhu Bolong smiled and pointed at Wango. Wango clenched his fists and replied with a ferocious expression. What a coincidence. I'm good at the mad dog biting intestines technique. All my enemies will die without leaving even half a bone behind. Along with the fierce curses, many people shook their heads and sighed at Qin Hao. They thought that he was extremely daring. Not only did he offend Prince Nalan, but he also dared to provoke the three aristocratic families. At this moment, Qin Hao was no different from a corpse in the eyes of everyone present. At this time, because no one continued to bid, Yi Shuihan had already used his spatial ring to retrieve the halberd on the stage and return to Qin Hao's side. Brat, you have guts. Just wait and see. Huangpu, Wenhua flung his sleeves and sat back down. On the stage, Shiman Gang and Nine Solitary Swords secretly made a throat-slitting gesture to the martial artists of their clans. They meant that after the auction ended, they would directly get rid of Qin Hao. They had to be fast and get rid of him before others made a move. Li Dazue saw this and sneered in his heart. Faster death? I'm afraid no one can compare with the three aristocratic families, because you will soon be annihilated. The auction continues. Next, please cheer up and listen carefully. The next item to be auctioned is the treasure brought by the sacred Dangu and the elders from Luo Shui, the Saint Soul Elixir, Li Dazue shouted. Before the auction began, Huangpu Quangzhan had already explained to everyone about the Saint Soul Elixir. It could help martial artists transcend mortality and was called a rare divine elixir. It was a symbol of epic making. Only one pill was needed to make a peak sky grandmaster enter the saint level in an instant. Under the heavenly saint level, one could upgrade their level at will. There was no need to break through the bottleneck or refine it. It could be upgraded in a second. The Saint Soul Elixir was the most anticipated and exciting finale of this auction. Everyone present was a martial artist. Many of them had been stuck at the bottleneck for decades and were at a loss. Many old Sky Grandmasters who were stuck below the Saint level would die of old age due to the limitation of their lifespan if they could not make a breakthrough. Now they were saved. With the Saint Soul Elixir, not only could they make a breakthrough, but they could also prolong their lives. Who wanted to die? In an instant, the entire auction house was noisy. Everyone was so excited that they could not control themselves. Everyone's eyes lit up, including the disciples of the three aristocratic families. Even Huangpu, Wenhua, and Shimentai had forgotten that they had failed in the auction. They were so excited that their eyes widened. As for Qin Hao, he was not moved at all. He was the one who had created the Saint Soul Elixir. He had enough herbs on hand and could have as many as he wanted. However, the Saint Soul Elixir was no longer effective for him. His mind was not on the Saint Soul Elixir. From the beginning, Danji's elder team had not brought the Saint Soul Elixir. It was just a cover. What Qin Hao cared about was when the old demon would find the whereabouts of the stone statue. He could only do what he wanted after he found the stone statue. Suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind. The old demon, who had been missing for a long time, had finally sent a message. He had signed a master-servant contract with Qin Hao, and their minds were connected. The stone statue that the three aristocratic families had hidden had finally been found. However, the old demon had encountered a little trouble and could not be brought over immediately, but he would be able to bring it back safely in 15 minutes. Therefore, this auction should be over. The lives of Shimen Gang and the other two could be taken. There was also Nailan Ertai, Zhu Bolong, and the group of trash. It was good that they did not provoke Qin Hao. Since they had provoked him, he would send them to the afterlife. Your Highness, look, that kid is still staring at us and smiling. How stupid is he? Zhu Bolong said secretly and pointed at Qin Hao's position. If it were him, he would definitely not refuse Shimen Gang and Solitary Nine Swords' good intentions. He would not wait to curry favor with them. Don't be noisy. This king's Saint Soul Elixir is coming. I have traveled thousands of miles for this Saint Soul Elixir. Nailan Ertai was trembling with excitement. His eyes were fixed on the auction stage, waiting for the maids to present the divine elixir that he had been dreaming of. Chapter 848. The atmosphere at the scene was very strange, making people very puzzled. What's going on? Where are the Saint Soul Elixirs? Quickly present it to us so that we can broaden our horizons. The Xian crystals in Old Man Sumeru pouch are about to fly out. I've prepared 1 million Xian crystals. I just want to get one. The warriors in the audience shouted anxiously. Elder Zhun, Elder Situ, asked the beauties of Dangu to take out the Saint Soul Elixirs. The Huangpu family borrowed 60 million Xian crystals from the Merchant Union for these Saint Soul Elixirs. Aha, don't joke with us. We can't wait any longer, Shimen Gang and the other two urged. They looked at the right side of the stage, where the 10 elders of Dangu were seated. However, Zhun Kaiwa and the others all had their eyes closed. They turned a deaf ear to the crowd's shouts. They were like old monks in meditation. Only Big Mouth Lee on the stage laughed creepily. He kept mumbling to Shimen Gang and the other two, "You're finished. You're finished." The scene was unspeakably weird. It sent chills down people's spines. Don't wait. Even if you die, you won't be able to, because you're not qualified to get the Saint Soul Elixirs. Suddenly, a very uncoordinated voice came from the crowd below the stage. Everyone turned to look at him. It was Qin Hao again, the white-haired guy with 2 silver strands on his forehead. What did he say? The 3 dominant families on the wasteland were not qualified to get the Saint Soul Elixirs? It was a slap in the face. Was this brat tired of living? Bastard. Sure enough, as soon as these words were spoken, Shimen Gang and the other 2 flew into a rage and stood up. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to criticize the 3 families? Make it clear. Don't think you can show off in the wasteland just because you have some money. This is not a place where you can do whatever you want. The three scolded angrily. Forget it, Grandpa. I think this guy is looking for trouble. Since he disrespected the three families, we must punish him severely. If we don't, wouldn't all the heroes here see us as a joke? Huangpu Wenhua had long found Qin Hao an eyesore. He no longer cared about the fact that Qin Hao was a guest who came a bit. He might as well take this opportunity to snatch his weapon. Grandson is willing to take down this person and raise the prestige of our Shiman clan. Shiman Tai had an impulsive look on his face as he volunteered to fight. We are willing to uphold our family's prestige and take down this arrogant bastard. Crash! About 1,000 juniors of the three noble clans followed Shiman Tai and stood up. This was a good opportunity to make a contribution. Ha ha! I've seen stupid people before, but I've never seen someone so stupid that he can't be cured. Do you know how many eyes Ma Wanya has on his head? You dare to challenge the three aristocratic families in the wasteland? Good luck. Nalan Ertai simply put his hands behind his back, ready to watch a good show. No matter whether Qin Hao had a backer or not, no matter how strong his backer was, distant water could not quench a present thirst. This time, even if he did not die, he would lose 3 layers of skin. At the same time, a black mass of martial artists hurriedly stood in the distance and cleared a large space. It was obvious that the 3 aristocratic families were about to make a move to prevent themselves from being accidentally injured. However, there were about 500 people who didn't know the difference between life and death. They were still very close to Qin Hao. Not only did they not leave, but they also squeezed closer. Men, take him down. Shiman Gang blew his beard and sent out an elite Yuan monarch from the Shiman clan. Qin Hao had a Yuan monarch bodyguard protecting him. He could not let his grandson take the risk. His grandson was only a profound sage. Prepare to die. With a loud roar, a burly man from the Shiman clan flew out from the large group of bodyguards on the auction stage. He pulled out a large saber from his waist, raised it above his head, and slashed it at Qin Hao's head. At this moment, a layer of red flames surged out of the burly man's body. Judging from the intensity, he was a 3rd-level Yuan monarch. Trash! There was no need for Qin Hao to make a move. Yi Shuihan snorted coldly and stretched out his fair right hand in front of him. He raised his index finger and twirled it 3 times in front of his nose. A mercury-like splendor appeared on his finger. Then he flicked it. Swoosh! The splendor turned into a stream of water. As if it had grown eyes, it wrapped around the waist of the burly man. Then, Yi Shuihan pulled the man to the side with all his might. Uffed! Before the burly man could land, his body was split into 2 halves in the air. Boiling hot blood splattered all over the floor. Boom! This shocked the entire audience. Many people turned pale and screamed in horror. The bold martial artists could not stand the bloody scene and stretched their necks to vomit. What? One move, killing a 3rd-level Yuan monarch? Shiman Tai, Huangpu Wenhua, and the rest of the younger generation were so frightened that their faces turned green. Nalan Ertai also trembled and broke out in cold sweat. He had not expected that one of Qin Hao's guards would have such a high cultivation level. Send a few more people. Attack them together. There is no need to spare their lives. This time, Dugan Nine's sword spoke with an ugly expression on his face. As the strongest of the 3 aristocratic families, he would not allow anyone to be so arrogant in front of him. With a wave of his hand, 5 Yuan monarchs flew out from the guard's formation and attacked Yi Shuihan together. 5 balls of scarlet flames burned fiercely. The intensity of their flames was even stronger than the burly man's. These people were the elites of the elites nurtured by the 3 aristocratic families. Their cultivation levels were not inferior to the intersect elders. They were in charge of the most difficult missions of the family and were used by the patriarch as a trump card. This auction was so grand that the representatives of the Merchant Union and Dan Ji's group of elders would be present. Therefore, they were sent to hold the line. In Dugun Nine Sword's opinion, Qin Hao and Yi Shuihan would definitely die once these 5 elites appeared. 5 level, 5 Yuan monarchs. Ha ha ha. On the contrary, Yishui Han laughed heartily. He was laughing very excitedly. In the next second, he made an extremely shocking move. He pounced on the 5 Yuan monarchs alone like a madman. However, Xiaogua, who was behind Qin Hao, could no longer hold back and grumbled unhappily. Once these 5 people are dead, only Shimin Gang and the other 2 old men are left. They are not enough to kill. If I don't attack now, I will have wasted my trip. Brother Han, reward me with an opponent. As he spoke, Xiaogua also leaped forward. Whoosh! A ball of scarlet flames ignited on his body. F***CK, the white-haired man has 2 guards. The other one is also a Yuan monarch. Both of the guards are so young. What a monster! There was an uproar in the auction hall. Many martialists pointed at Xiaogua and Yishui Han and exclaimed in surprise. At the same time, they silently glanced at Qin Hao and lamented that Qin Hao's luck was really good. However, they did not know that Qin Hao's cultivation was actually the strongest. It was enough to crush Xiaogua and Yishui Han. The 4 of you, stop them. Wait for me to chop off the head of this white-haired fellow. At this time, the leader of the 5 Yuan monarchs, a guy in green clothes, realized that Xiaogua and Yishui Han were not easy to deal with. Therefore, he chose to go straight to the point and take off Qin Hao's head. He felt that he was too damn smart. Chapter 849. Shimin Gang and Huangpu Quangjia nodded in admiration as the green-clothed captain displayed his magnificent sword technique. He was indeed an elite expert secretly trained by the Dugu family. The combat power of the green-clothed captain was at the peak of the 5th-level Yuan monarch. After this sword strike, the white-haired youth had no chance of surviving. However, in the next second, their expressions changed as they saw the other 4 Yuan monarchs split into groups of 2 and attack Xiaogua and Yishui Han. Yishui Han's palms emitted 2 balls of mercury-like brilliance. He pushed them forward and enveloped his opponents. Then he clenched his fists and clenched them. Boom! The mercury-like brilliance that enveloped the 2 Yuan monarchs started to shrink rapidly. It became smaller and smaller until it was compressed into a ball. The Yuan monarchs in the ball were unable to resist and screamed in pain as they were squeezed into meat paste. Accompanied by a loud noise, the ball of water and the human body exploded into 2 balls of blood mist in mid-air and scattered. Xiaogua's attack was even more straightforward as he threw 2 small fists at his opponents. His opponents were 2 burly men. Their faces were filled with disdain. With a shout, they extended their fists straight at him. In their eyes, Xiaogua was just a child who was still wet behind the ears. He actually dared to fight them with his fists. He was extremely foolish. However, when the 4 fists collided, a vigorous force like that of a wild bull was felt. The 2 burly men immediately followed in the footsteps of their companions and let out heart-wrenching screams. Their entire arms were smashed into meat paste by Xiaogua. The vibrating force hit their bodies and sent them flying like tattered cloth bags. They fell heavily on the auction stage and landed at the feet of the Dugan 9 swords. When he fell, his 4 limbs, bones, 5 viscera, and 6 bowels were shattered by Qi Xiaogua. He was deader than dead. How is this possible? Not only was the Dugan 9 sword in disbelief, but Shimin Gang and Huangpu Quangjia were also shocked. At this moment, a 3rd scream was heard. The 3 of them shuddered as they looked up and realized that it was the green-clothed captain. Almost as soon as the green-clothed captain's sword Qi was released, an even more turbulent light burst out from Qin Hao's position. That was a beam of halberd light. It was so bright that it blinded the eyes of everyone present. Qin Hao simply took out Qin Yun's halberd. Holding it with one hand, he chopped down with the halberd, sending out a 300-foot-long halberd light. The halberd light's power lifted up the stone tiles on the ground, completely swallowing up the green-clothed captain's sword energy. Then, the halberd light cut through the captain's head, instantly splitting him in half. The 2 halves of the body were struck by the Yuan Qi and were sent flying far away. At this moment, a layer of dazzling red flame rose from the top of Qin Hao's head. The white hair in front of his forehead fluttered, and his eyes were cold. The way he held the halberd with one hand made him look like a god of war. Together with Qin Hao's extraordinary height, he looked extremely mighty. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. No one would have thought that Qin Hao was also a Yuan monarch. With one move, he split the body of the green-clothed captain, who was the strongest among them. Nalan Ertai, who was in the crowd, was so frightened that he fell to the ground. His eyes were filled with intense fear as he pointed at Qin Hao's position. His fingers were trembling, and his mouth was trembling. He was so frightened that he could not utter a single word. Behind Qin Hao, the Heaven's End cliff was so emotional that tears were flowing down his cheeks. When he had saved Duan Ruiying, Qin Hao was only a profound sage. Now that he had returned, he had become a Yuan monarch. At this moment, he no longer doubted Qin Hao's words. Today was the day that the three aristocratic families would be destroyed. Qin Hao had come prepared. How dare you? I really did not expect that there would be three Yuan monarchs. All of them have extraordinary cultivation. Shimin Gang and the other two had ugly expressions on their faces. They could determine the cultivation of Qin Hao and the others based on the strength of their Yuan Qi. Among them, Yi Shuihan was the highest, at level 8. Xiaogua was the weakest, at level 4. As for Qin Hao himself, he was also a level 5 Yuan monarch. It was obvious that Xiaogua and Qin Hao were not ordinary Yuan monarchs. This was because they could kill enemies of a higher level. This brat came prepared. He openly provoked us at the auction. He is clearly going against the three aristocratic families. Huangpu Wenhua gritted his teeth as he pointed at Qin Hao. Although he was intimidated by the other party's cultivation, he was not afraid. Huangpu Wenhua and the other two on the stage were all peak Yuan monarchs. They were half a step away from becoming venerables. It would be easy for them to deal with Qin Hao. Brat, I don't care which country you are from. Why are you here today? Don't even think about leaving here alive. Duga Nine Sword was heartbroken that he had lost 5 of his family's elites. Stop talking nonsense. Just attack. Shimin Gang exchanged glances with the other two. Then, like a giant bird, he took the lead and attacked Xiaogua. He was very smart. Xiaogua's cultivation base was the lowest, so he was the easiest to deal with. Although Qin Hao's strength was not that high, but with Qin Yun's halberd in his hand, Shimin Gang had a shadow of that halberd. As he spoke, a large black shield appeared in Shimin Gang's hand. He was like a wild donkey that had run out of the forest. He lifted the shield and charged at Xiaogua's weak body. When he moved, Huangpu Wenhua and Duga Nine Swords moved at the same time. Huangpu Wenhua charged at Yi Shuihan. His fists danced like 2 large black hammers. Duga Nine Swords' eyes were bloodshot as he charged at Qin Hao. He wanted to take revenge for the 5 aristocratic families' elites. At this moment, a large sword the size of a palm appeared in Duga Nine Swords' hands. He let out a thunderous roar and slashed with his sword. Good timing. Duga was very worried when he saw Xiaogua and Yi Shuihan charging at Shimin Gang and Huangpu Wenhua. He was more worried about Qin Hao. After all, Duga Nine Swords was known as the strongest person in the 3 aristocratic families besides the Patriarch and the Great Elder. Even though he had lost an arm, Qin Hao might not be a match for Duga even if he had Qin Yun's weapon. Therefore, Duga did not hesitate to meet the enemy, even though the poison in his body had not been completely expelled. You don't have to do anything. Qin Hao sneered. As soon as he said that, a figure dashed towards the Duga Nine Swords like a gust of wind. The speed of the figure was so fast that no one could see it clearly. Even though Duan Tianya was a level 8 Yuan monarch, he couldn't react in time. Without a doubt, it was Yi Wuhan. Old man, take my sword. After the battle at Starry Moon College, Yi Wuhan's cultivation base had improved with the help of Yao Lao. He was now a 7th level Yuan monarch, but there was still a huge gap between him and Duga Nine Swords. Since he had an essence soul, he did not dare to be careless. He could not fight head-on, so he relied on speed to win. Now that he made his move, he nimbly avoided Duga Nine Swords' ferocious sword and relied on his fast movement technique to find gaps in his opponent's defenses. Duga Nine Swords was very uncomfortable. His essence energy was stronger than Yi Wuhan's, and his strength was heavier. He had powerful skills, but could not use them. This made him very frustrated and anxious. F***CK, the third Yuan Monarch Guard. What's the background of this fellow? The spectating cultivators turned to look at Qin Hao's position. Everyone's eyes were filled with curiosity. Qin Hao had given them too many surprises, and all the signs indicated that he was definitely not simple. Your Highness, let's take this opportunity to slip away. At this moment, the dark-faced elder guarding Nalan Urtai felt the pressure and advised the other party to leave. At first, they wanted to take revenge on Qin Hao. Fortunately, they did not take revenge. If they had really fought, who knew who would be the one taking revenge? Old hero, don't be afraid. Didn't you see? Senior Shiman Gang and the others are all peak Yuan monarchs. I, Zhu Bolong, can guarantee that the white-haired fellow's guard will not be able to take more than 3 moves and will be defeated in the end. Zhu Bolong pointed at the battlefield. That will be the death of the white-haired fellow. I, Wongo, will execute the mad dog, gnawing divine technique, and destroy his corpse. Wongo's eyes glowed with madness as he licked his lips in disgust. Chapter 850. Nalan Urtai had never suffered any losses since he was young. He was a petty person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He would not be willing to leave until Qin Hao was dismembered. At this moment, the 6 Yuan monarchs in the auction hall were fighting in 3 different groups. The battle became more and more violent, and the whistling of their vital energy shook the auction hall, causing waves of tremors. The first to make everyone scream was Tsiogwa. Shiman Gang felt that Tsiogwa was the weakest and thought that he was easy to bully. However, when he rushed over with his big black shield, the person standing in front of him was no longer a young man. With a whoosh, Tsiogwa's height increased by more than 5 meters, and a large patch of thick hair grew on his chest. He had transformed into a burly giant with muscles all over his body. His arms were thicker than a normal person's waist, and his thighs were like pillars. He stood tall like a pillar. The most terrifying thing was his appearance. He was no longer human. He had a single horn on his head, 2 sharp fangs that curved upwards from his mouth, and a thick tail that extended from his buttocks. He was clearly a beast man. Essence Soul Elite. Shiman Gang exclaimed. He recognized him immediately, but he could not stop moving. Shiman Gang was originally very burly and had an extraordinary aura as he carried a 2.5-meter tall black shield. However, when he ran in front of Tsiogwa, Shiman Gang looked as small as a baby in front of the 5-meter tall giant. It was a stark contrast. Bang! In the end, the black shield that crashed into Tsiogwa only managed to hit his thighs. The 2 thighs seemed to be welded to the ground and did not move at all. The full force of a peak Yuan monarch was not effective at all. You pitiful little old man. Tsiogwa looked down at Shiman Gang and spoke in an unusually rough voice. Then, to Shiman Gang's horror, a fist the size of a sandbag descended from the sky and smashed into his head. This punch made Shiman Gang see stars. He felt dizzy and was thrown into the air with his shield. Blood spurted out uncontrollably. Damn it! Another furious roar came from the battlefield. It was Huangpu Zhanquang, who was fighting with Yi Shuihan. Huangpu Zhanquang knew that Yi Shuihan was a level 8 Yuan monarch. Although his cultivation was impressive, he knew that Yi Shuihan was no match for Huangpu Zhanquang. At the very least, he thought so because he was a peak Yuan monarch. But in fact, when the 2 of them started fighting, Huangpu Mad Warrior's confidence instantly disappeared. Yi Shuihan's ability was beyond his imagination. His entire body had turned into a ball of water, and his body was translucent. No matter how terrifying Huangpu Zhanquang's attacks were, he could not hurt Yi Shuihan at all. Even if his vital qi penetrated Yi Shuihan's body and even riddled the water body with holes, Yi Shuihan could instantly reconstruct it. He was like an unkillable monster. There was no doubt that Yi Shuihan was another prodigy with an essence soul after Tsiogwa had revealed his beast soul. Huangpu Zhanquang did not believe that Yi Shuihan was using a water-type cultivation technique. Water-type cultivation techniques were limited and could not be as difficult to deal with as Yi Shuihan. Only an essence soul mystique could reach such a level. In fact, his guess was right. In the next second, Yi Shuihan absorbed his essence soul into his body and revealed his water god avatar. As a dazzling brilliance enveloped his body, Yi Shuihan's appearance changed drastically. First, he was covered by the mercury armor. Then, his hair turned silver white in an instant. His face was as solemn as a deity that had descended to the mortal world. His sacred aura spread, and many weak-minded martialists could not help but kneel down and kowtow to him. "Take my blade." After Yi Shuihan absorbed his essence soul into his body, his cultivation level increased significantly again. His palm stroked his waist, and a cold light suddenly flashed. Then, a 50-meter-long saber descended from the sky. This saber could shrink at will and was made of supreme-grade materials. It was Yilong Yuan's famous weapon, and now it was passed down to his son. At this moment, Yi Shuihan held the saber with both hands. He floated in the air and slashed at Huangpu Zhanquang, who was on the ground. Before the saber landed, there was a shattering sound in the air. Countless cracks appeared on the ground. The cracks were caused by the saber aura. At this moment, Huangpu Zhanquang's face was extremely pale. He had never seen such a powerful and terrifying attack since the start of the battle. He even forgot to resist and forgot to dodge. Pucci! Blood splattered as the saber took away one of Huangpu Zhanquang's arms. At the critical moment, he was sent flying by Shiman Gang. It was not that Shiman Gang wanted to save him. Shiman Gang was sent flying by Tsaogua's punch and happened to collide with Huangpu Zhanquang. Then, the two of them landed on the ground. It was only then that Huangpu Zhanquang woke up from his shock. He realized that he had lost an arm and started rolling on the ground in pain, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Shiman Gang wasn't much better off. Tsaogua's punch was too powerful, and it violently shook his brain. Under the raging power, his brain was almost torn apart, and his eyes were temporarily blinded. This terrified him to the extreme. He desperately covered his face with his hands and screamed, "My eyes! I can't see! I can't see!" Horrifying cries reverberated throughout the auction house for a long time. At this time, the strongest solitary 9 swords was also defeated, but he wasn't defeated by Yi Wuhan. In fact, Yi Wuhan had almost died under the sword of solitary 9 swords. At the start of the fight, Yi Wuhan had indeed gained a small advantage. His speed was fast, and his body was like a slippery loach. He circled around 9 swords beyond the swords and kept slashing, cutting his opponent's clothes into pieces. Gradually, dense wounds appeared on his body. These wounds were very shallow and not fatal, so Yi Wuhan didn't dare to get too close. This was because every time 9 solitary swords swung his sword, just the pressure alone would cause Yi Wuhan's chi and blood to surge. In the end, solitary 9 swords went berserk and danced with his sword like a madman, forming a dense net of swords in a 50-meter radius around him. Yi Wuhan was carelessly hit by his opponent's sword and was sent flying. 9 solitary swords was overjoyed and was about to end Yi Wuhan's life. But suddenly, a powerful finger light entered the battlefield, aiming straight for solitary 9 sword's heart. The power of this finger beam was astonishing, and it emitted an ear-piercing sound as it pierced through the air. 9 solitary swords was indeed the strongest peak Yuan Monarch. His reaction was indeed fast, as he used his sword to block in front of him. Clang! Flames flickered. In the end, 9 solitary swords and his sword were sent flying by the finger beam. Midway, the finger beam easily pierced through his sword. This sword was 3 fingers thick, but it was still pierced through by the finger beam. After piercing through his sword, it entered his abdomen. 9 solitary swords' eyes widened as he involuntarily fell onto the auction stage, together with Shiman Gang and Huangpu Quangzhan. 3 peak Yuan monarchs had been defeated at the same time. This scene was undoubtedly a resounding slap to the faces of everyone present. This was an outcome that they had never expected. "Thank you for your help, junior brother." Yi Wuhan was in a rather sorry state as he retreated with a trace of dejection. He had originally wanted to help Qin Hao, but he had almost been killed instead. 9 solitary swords was ruthless and ruthless. He had lost an arm, but was still so strong. Yi Wuhen felt very upset because Yi Shuaihan and Xiaogua had defeated their opponents. Only he hadn't. Didn't this mean that Yi Wuhen wasn't as good as Xiaogua and Yi Shuaihan? Don't be upset. 9 solitary swords cultivation is the strongest among the 3 old fellows. He has faintly touched the Yuan Venerate level. His Yuan Qi is profound, and ordinary people simply can't withstand half a move from him. It's already very good that you were able to last so long with him. It's normal that you couldn't break through his sword aura. Qin Hao patted Yi Wuhen's shoulder to console him. Yi Wuhen was stunned. The more he heard, the more upset he felt. Ordinary people? Am I, Yi Wuhen, an ordinary person? Ordinary people couldn't withstand half a move from 9 solitary swords, but junior brother Qin Hao defeated him with half a move. Forget it. Chapter 851. As the 3 great Yuan monarchs were defeated so quickly, the entire auction hall fell silent. Everyone stretched their necks and widened their eyes. It was as if their hearts had stopped beating. The outcome was too unexpected. The disciples of the 3 clans, who were shouting loudly and arrogantly about cutting Qin Hao into 1,000 pieces, instantly shut their mouths. Their expressions were uglier than if they were crying. Many people's legs couldn't help but tremble as they felt the urge to urinate. Shimin Gang and the other 2 were the strongest experts of the 3 clans in the auction house. They were like gods. Qin Hao had pierced through the sky above their heads. Although they felt a trace of fear, these juniors of the 3 clans didn't think that Qin Hao would kill anyone. This was also what Shimin Gang and the other 3 thought. Therefore, even though they had lost, they were still arrogant. Good lad, you are extremely daring. I didn't expect his bodyguard to be a super genius with an essence spirit. All 3 of them have an essence spirit. Shimin Gang shook his head with all his might, dispelling the shock in his head. After losing his sight for a short while, his vision gradually returned, and he was no longer panicking. He looked at Xiaogua, who was below the stage, and his gaze swept past Yi Shuaihan and the others. An essence spirit martial artist was 1 in 10,000. They were recognized as monstrous existences and were extremely rare in the wasteland. Today, 3 of them had appeared. Xiaogua, who had transformed into a half-beast giant, obviously had a beast soul. Yi Shuaihan's essence spirit was of a water element, and its grade was quite high. As for the young man who was fighting with 9 solitary swords, he was very fast, although he lost in the end due to the difference in cultivation level. In 9 solitary swords' heart, he had a strong fear of Yi Wuhen. These 3 people are very difficult to deal with. I hope that Representative Jean and Representative Hai can send experts to help us. After this, we will definitely thank you. Huangpu Berserker staggered up. He didn't think too much and hurriedly asked Haidafu for help. Pucci. Before he could finish, a short blade, glowing with green light, suddenly attacked him from behind, piercing his dantian. A section of the green tip of the blade emerged from the front of Huangpu Quangzhan's abdomen, looking exceptionally horrifying. I'm sorry, did I hurt you? I'll pull out. After Big Mouth Lee succeeded, he pulled out his saber with a Pucci sound. With a sinister smile on his face, he quickly retreated and widened the distance between them. He flashed down the stage and stood beside Qin Hao. My little ancestor, we got it. Big Mouth Lee chuckled and bowed. Then, he looked at Yi Shuaihan with an expression that was asking for a reward. He was the chief eunuch of the Luo Shui Imperial Palace, and he was only acting for Yi Shuaihan. The dagger in his hand was not an ordinary weapon either. It was a mid-grade king weapon, the Origin Cleaving Dagger. It was a killing weapon collected by Yi Long Yuan, which could break the cultivation of any martial artist in the king stage. The saber had been dipped in poison, so there was no way for him to survive. Sorry to trouble you, Senior Li. Qin Hao waved his hand. Li Big Mouth nodded and left. His mission was completed. Why? Huangpu Zhan Quang was caught off guard. Not to mention him, Even Shimin Gang and 9 Solitary Sword were stunned on the spot. Then, their anger soared to the sky. At that moment, Huangpu Zhan Kuang clutched his abdomen, where a large amount of rotten green blood was flowing out. He looked at Hai Dafu with a pained expression. Big Mouth Li was the auctioneer appointed by Hai Dafu and Jin Yuxuan. However, the 3 aristocratic families had no enmity with the Merchant Alliance. He did not understand why the other party would do such a thing. Because you've offended someone you shouldn't have. The tiredness on Hai Dafu's face disappeared. He was full of energy. He looked at Jin Yuxuan, smiled at each other, and stood up together. When the other 10 counselors saw that, they stood up at the same time. Crash! The wall behind them suddenly collapsed, and a large amount of smoke and dust filled the air. Within the smoke and dust, tall figures appeared one after another. There were about 100 of them, and all of them were king-level strongmen. They were the personal bodyguards of the Merchant Alliance's counselors. As soon as they appeared, they surrounded the younger disciples of the 3 aristocratic families, blocking off any escape route. More than 100 balls of red flame aura flashed. The powerful Yuan Qi frightened the disciples of the 3 aristocratic families. Young master, give the order to kill. At that moment, Hai Dafu walked leisurely to Qin Hao. He had received Qin Hao's telepathic message that the old demon had found the stone statue. In terms of wealth, connections, I, Jin Yuxuan, have always been unconvinced by you, Hai Dafu. However, my only failure was to meet old Hao later than you. Jin Yuxuan walked over and smiled at Qin Hao. He even sighed. After the incident in the Imperial Mausoleum, Jin Yuxuan had long regarded Qin Hao as a close friend. Without Qin Hao, he would not have been able to return to Luo Shui alive. It's you. Huangpu Zhan Kuang trembled as he struggled to turn around. He raised his hand and pointed at Qin Hao. His face was filled with hatred. But soon after, he spat out a mouthful of green blood. He fell to the ground unwillingly with despair. Zhan Kuang, second elder, grandfather. Instantly, Shimin Gang and the rest cried out anxiously. They clenched their fists in anger. Although the 3 aristocratic families had always been fighting in the dark, they had always been on good terms. Huangpu Wenhua did not care about his own life. He broke through Hai Dafu's men and threw himself onto the stage. He hugged Huangpu Zhan Kuang's corpse and cried, I don't understand. How did I offend the Merchant Alliance? Why did you collude to ambush us? Shimin Gang glared at Hai Dafu and demanded an answer. What's the point of saying all this? Zhan Kuang is already dead. This grudge is irreconcilable. Whether it's the white-haired brat or the Merchant Alliance, none of them can be allowed to leave this place alive. I will use their lives to pay tribute to Zhan Kuang. Duganine, swords roared crazily. Suddenly, he thought of something and rushed to the right side of the auction stage. He looked at the elders in robes and pleaded, Elders Dango, please help the 3 aristocratic families to kill the white-haired brat and Hai Dafu's henchmen. I, Duganine Swords, beg. I thank you. Abandoning his dignity, Duganine Swords knelt down heavily and knocked his head on the stage. Elders Dango, please help us. Only the elders can fight against the Merchant Alliance. Dango has always been a righteous person. If you are willing to help the 3 aristocratic families, the Patriarch will treat the elders as his benefactors. The disciples of the 3 aristocratic families knelt down and begged. I, Shimin Gang, represent the Shimin family and beg for your help. Shimin Gang also knelt down. Get up. I won't help you. Zhen Kaiwa finally opened his eyes. With a cold smile, he stood up with his hands behind his back. Why? Are you not here to sell pills? Dan Gu came here this time because he had an agreement with the 3 aristocratic families. As long as you are willing to help, the 3 aristocratic families will buy all of Dan Ji's pills. No. We'll buy them all at double the price. Shimin Gang panicked. Dan Ji's elders were his only hope. If they didn't help, he might really die here. It didn't matter if he died. However, the younger generation of the 3 aristocratic families had gathered here. Chapter 852. Let me tell you why they didn't do anything. It's because Qin Hao smiled and pointed at himself. The Saint Soul pill is in my hands. In other words, it's a product of my research. This, Shimin Gang's eyes widened in shock. He couldn't believe it. The divine pill that he had been dreaming of was in the hands of that white-haired young man. So, it's impossible for us, Dan Gu, to help. We're here to take care of you. Jin Kaiwa sneered and suddenly shouted. Whoosh! Following his shout, a figure suddenly flew into the crowd of Dan Ji's elders. His aura was very strong, even stronger than 9 solitary swords. Moreover, his movement technique was extremely fast. He pressed his palm on Huangpu Wenhua's head. Bang! Huangpu Wenhua's head flew out like a broken watermelon. Huangpu Wenhua's headless body also fell on his grandfather's body. 9 solitary swords went crazy. Even his old friend's grandson couldn't be saved under his nose. How could he face Huangpu Zhanquang after entering the Yellow Springs? He roared angrily, wielding his sword with one hand. He charged straight at Qin Hao, slashing his sword down. However, before he could get close to Huangpu Wenhua, the Pill Pavilion's elder that had killed him struck his chest with a palm strike. At that moment, Dugan 9 Swords, the person with the strongest battle prowess beneath the 3 clan chiefs, was smashed to the ground. When he landed, his sternum was broken. When he landed, the sturdy auction stage was smashed into pieces. The entire auction house shook. One could see how terrifying that palm was. You've just reached the pseudo-venerable bottleneck. You can't even withstand a single blow. Elder Dangu was the strongest person under the imperial censor. He was the Grand Elder of Internal Affairs. His cultivation was at the pseudo-venerable realm. He was only a step away from the venerable realm. After saying that, the Grand Elder hurriedly lowered his head and cupped his hands in front of Qin Hao. Little ancestor, old Dugu has been killed by me. He won't live for more than 3 breaths. Well done. Qin Hao patted the Grand Elder's shoulder and gave him a look of praise. The Great Elder was overwhelmed by this favor. Puff! Just as he said, 9 solitary swords spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with his internal organs, spraying all over his face. Yu. He raised his hand, wanting to point at Qin Hao, but halfway through, his hand fell to the ground. He died in a single breath. Rumble. All the martial artists present were shocked. 9 solitary swords was a powerhouse who had touched the threshold of a pseudo-venerable, but he was actually slapped to death with a single palm. At this moment, everyone was looking at Dangu and the Elder Council with fear in their eyes. However, every single one of Danji's elders looked at Qin Hao with a worried expression. It was as if they were worried that they had done something wrong and angered Qin Hao. This caused the cultivators to once again focus their attention on Qin Hao. Just where did this person come from? Who exactly was he? To make Dangu and the other elders so afraid? Who are you? Who are you? Why would they do something so inhumane? Why would they target our 3 great families? Shimin Gang had lost 2 of his old friends, so he was incomparably sorrowful. Looking at Huangpu Wenhua's headless corpse, he couldn't help but cry. Although he still didn't know who Qin Hao was, he understood that today was a trap deliberately set by Qin Hao to bait them. Huangpu Zhanquang and 9 solitary swords are already dead. They must have been thinking about this when they took their last breaths. But they weren't as lucky as you. You're still alive and know the answer. As for me being inhumane, how can I compare to your 3 great families' ruthlessness? You killed people, not even sparing a child and a chicken. Back then, when you set up a trap to trick the Qin family's ancestors and experts, and when you slaughtered their descendants, did you ever think of being inhumane? Qin Yun's younger brother was only 5 years old, but you viciously stomped him into a headless corpse. Did you ever think of being inhumane? The Qin family had 19 cities, 56 counties, and a total of 120,000 people, but you slaughtered them all in one night. At that time, why didn't you think of being inhumane? You want to know who I am? It's very simple. Qin Hao clenched his teeth and raised his right hand into the air. Boom! A ball of flames slowly rose. The flames burned like blood, like the endless fighting spirit of the Qin family. Shimin Gang was no stranger to this ball of flames. His face suddenly turned pale, and his mouth opened wide. His voice trembled. "It's you? How? How is this possible?" Qin Yun's performance at the Broken Dragon Cliff that night was indeed fierce. However, the scene of Qin Hao returning from the cliff with Dugu Jin's corpse in front of the three great families after condensing his soul was deeply shocking. At that time, the flames on Qin Hao's body were just like the flames on his palm, so hot that it could drip blood. However, Shimin Gang could not associate the 9-foot-tall Qin Hao with the ugly pockmarked dwarf who was less than a meter tall at the Broken Dragon Cliff. The difference was too big. Do you know of a divine bone-shrinking technique in this world? Seeing Shimin Gang's confusion, Qin Hao's lips curled up. He turned around in front of everyone, and with a cloud of white smoke, he turned into the dwarf that night. Then, he turned back into his original body. Boom! This divine ability of stealing the sky and swapping the sun opened the eyes of the hundreds of thousands of martial artists present, and they all revealed shocked expressions. "Ha ha ha! I see. You're the survivor of the Qin family that Qin Yun risked his life to seal Huangpu Huichuan's petrification to save. It's really you. Ha ha ha!" Shimin Gang laughed loudly. After knowing Qin Hao's identity, he calmed down and did not panic. "What are you laughing at? Do you know who you've offended? He's the new super genius of Western Liang, the champion of the Luo Shui New Star competition, Qin Hao. He's also the little ancestor in the eyes of all alchemists." Elder Zhan wished he could kick Shimin Gang's face. "You blind dog, of all people, you had to offend Yao Lao and the successor of Dan Xian. Yes, he's also Yi Shuihan's boss." Yi Shuihan said. "He's also the leader of our Grand Alliance." Xiaowei said. "He's also the new master of our blood clan." With a rip, Aku tore the Chong Sam on her body. Finally, she did not have to continue acting, revealing a short and tight outfit. Under the tube top, it was bulging. "There's one more thing I have to tell you. The thorn in your side, the Qin family, is now the fourth empire in Western Liang, the Western Qin Empire, and Qin Hao is the crown prince of the empire. Now you know who the enemy of the three aristocratic families is, right?" "Ha ha!" Aku walked to Shimin Gang's side unscrupulously. She covered her mouth and laughed so hard that her body trembled. Bang! Shimin Gang felt like he was hit in the head. Dan Ji's little ancestor? The boss respected by the Luo Shui crown prince? The leader of the Grand Alliance? What was the Grand Alliance? Shimin Gang did not know, but the two titles were enough to scare him to death. Now that even the Blood Clan had been recruited by Qin Hao and became his slaves, Shimin Gang felt that the world was about to collapse. What was even more unbelievable was that Qin Hao's family had established an empire in Western Liang. Only now did he understand who the enemy of the three aristocratic families was. An empire. No, an Luo Shui empire. Chapter 853. But so what? Shimin Gang chuckled hoarsely as he looked at Qin Hao seriously. "Our three clans have dominated the wasteland for thousands of years. You can't even begin to imagine how strong our foundations are. You were just throwing an egg at a rock." He knew very well what Qin Hao's objective was. Qin Hao wanted to save Qin Yun, break the Blood Abyss seal, and release the Qin family's patriarch. However, that was impossible. The patriarchs and elders of the three clans were Yuan Venerate powerhouses, so they would be able to sense something happening at the auction. When they arrived, they would be able to retaliate. Qin Hao was an ignorant child who had many backers and had not even brought a Yuan Venerate with him. He was simply too confident. Furthermore, you can't find Qin Yun's stone statue. Only the people of our three clans know its secret location. Are you unwilling to accept this? Qin Yun ended up being petrified in order to save you, yet you can't save him. Isn't that ironic? You might as well beg me. Ha ha ha. Shimin Gang laughed heartily. He was laughing. He laughed twice. Bang! Bang! Two heads fell from the sky and rolled to the ground, leaving a trail of blood before stopping at his feet. For pairs of eyes filled with fear stared straight at Shimin Gang from the top of the head. Shimin Gang's laughter came to an abrupt halt. His eyes turned red as he roared, "No!" The two heads in front of him belonged to none other than the great elders of the Shimin clan and the Dugu clan. They were on par with Huangpu family grand elder Huangpu Huichun. They were first-level Yuan venerates and had been tasked with guarding Qin Yun's stone statue. However, the heads of the two Yuan venerates had been cut off. The expressions on the heads were horrified, as if they had encountered something extremely terrifying before they died. "Who is it? Who is it?" Shimin Gang howled hysterically. The space of the auction hall suddenly shook and formed a vortex. A man with white hair and a youthful complexion walked out of the vortex. He was holding a horsetail whisk and wearing a green pointy hat. There is no doubt that this was the old demon who had possessed Dugu Xuanxiao's body. He was the one who killed the two men just now. But at this time, Shimin Gang didn't know that Dugu Xuanxiao's soul had been swallowed by the old demon. He was pleasantly surprised and shouted, "Elder Taishang." He even forgot about the tragic death of the two great elders. He was only excited. With Dugu Xuanxiao's appearance, he and the disciples of the three clans wouldn't have to die. "Grand Elder, you're the Grand Elder of the Dugu family, Dugu Xianxiao." Shimin Gang cried tears of joy as he looked at the man with an extraordinary bearing who was gradually walking over. When the disciples of the three clans heard this, their bodies seemed to fall to the ground. They wiped the cold sweat from their foreheads, feeling as if they had just survived a disaster. "This is too exciting." Among the crowd of warriors, Wang Go and Zhu Bolong also wiped the sweat off their faces. "The ones who will die this time will be the white-haired kid and Dangu." Nalan Ertai patted his belly. He had already said that Qin Hao would die. But suddenly, the old demon smiled strangely. The hat on his head flew straight to the heads of the disciples of the three clans who had fallen to the ground. Halfway through, the hat expanded and spun. A layer of green light appeared on the edge of the hat. It gradually turned into a giant object with a length and width of 500 meters, shaped like a giant pot. There was a muffled bang. The disciples of the three clans who didn't have time to react were all taken in. Then, a strong green light flashed wildly on the hat, and the miserable screams of the disciples of the three clans came out from it. The time was very short, only 3 breaths. The hat slowly rose and shrank back to its original shape, returning to the old demon's head. There were no more disciples of the three clans in the auction house. Only bones were left on the ground. "Oh my God, what is that hat?" It actually refined the descendants of the three clans alive. Isn't the Grand Elder of the Dugu family the one who did it? Why did he do this to his own descendants? At this moment, all the warriors were shocked. "Grand Elder Xianxiao, are you crazy?" Shimin Gang's face was contorted. The pleasant surprise on his face turned into anger and disbelief. "Who the hell is your Grand Elder?" "I am a Deputy Alliance Master of the Grand Alliance. Please address me as Second Master politely." The old demon rolled his eyes at Shimin Gang, wondering if he had a brain. Then he chuckled and bowed in front of Qin Hao. "Master, I have brought little brother Qin Yun's stone statue. All the guards in the stronghold have been killed by me, including these 2 low-level Yuan venerates." The old demon pointed at the 2 heads on the ground. Just as Shimin Gang had said, only the people of the 3 clans knew where Qin Yun's stone statue was hidden. Furthermore, only people with very high status in the 3 clans had the right to know. At first, the old demon had used Dugu Xuanxiao's identity to ask hundreds of people of the Dugu family, but hadn't been able to find anything. He had been so anxious that he had almost gone straight to the current patriarch. However, he had restrained himself in the end. The patriarchs of the 3 clans were all Yuan venerate experts. The old demon could deal with one of them, but he would be finished if he had to deal with 2 of them. In the end, he had been lucky enough to capture the 3rd elder of the inner sect and interrogate him about the location of the stone statue. However, there had been 2 low-level Yuan venerates guarding the stone statue. This had made things a little difficult for the old demon. It was easy for him to save people but it was a little difficult to take away Wuck's stone statue from the two Yuan venerates. The stone statue was fragile and couldn't withstand any attacks. Fortunately, the old demon played the role of Dugu Xianxiao again and caught the two elders by surprise. Only then was he able to bring the stone statue back. As he spoke, his spatial ring flashed, and a huge rock fell in front of all the martial artists with a pong sound. The huge stone was the body of two people that were severely twisted together. They were Qin Yin and Huangpu Huichun. Qin Yin was still in the same position as when he had sealed Huangpu Huichun. He hugged the other party's waist tightly and looked up with his mouth wide open, as if he was shouting something. Upon seeing this, Qin Hao heard a voice that shook the sky. Run! Run back! Become a Yuan Monarch powerhouse and lead people to break the seal. This was Qin Yun's instructions back then. It was also considered his last wish. Old cousin. Qin Hao's eyes were a little wet as he stood in front of the stone statue and gently slid his finger across Qin Yun's cheek. Even though he had turned into a stone statue, the wounds on Qin Yun's body were still discernible. Boom! Shimin Gang was so shocked that his body leaned back, and with a thud, he fell to the ground in a sorry state. The younger generation of the three clans had been slaughtered by Dugu Xianxiao alone, including his grandson, Shimin Tai. No, that wasn't Dugu Xianxiao. Ha ha ha. The heavens want to destroy our three clans. The heavens are blind. Shimin Gang was in tears after losing his grandson. He didn't know what had happened to Dugu Xianxiao, but he was no longer the grand elder he knew. He was an enemy. If the heavens let you live, then the heavens are blind. Akka crossed his arms and sneered. But so what? Can you break the petrification? You can't. Also, the poison in Duantian Cliff and his daughter was personally refined by Patriarch Huangpu. Patriarch Huangpu is a Yuan venerate alchemist. The antidote provided at the auction was fake. Even if this old man dies, you won't be able to save anyone. You'll have to give everything to me. My grandson and I will be buried together. Shimin Gang roared and shot up from the ground. He picked up a shield and smashed it at Qin Hao. Get lost. The old monster casually struck out with his palm. His palm penetrated the shield, causing it to shatter into pieces from the tremendous force. Then, the palm hit Shimin Gang's chest and completely penetrated it. Chapter 854. Qin Hao already knew that the antidote was fake, so he did not give it to Heavens and Cliff. You're still spouting nonsense at death's door to raise your status. What can the poison of a supremacy alchemist do? Do you think you can compete with our Dango in alchemy? Elder Zhen snorted disdainfully. The surrounding martial artists shuddered at once. That's right. No matter how potent clan leader Huangpu's poison was, could it stump Western Liang Dango? At that moment, Heaven's and Cliff's enemies, Wang Go and Zhu Bolong, were secretly delighted. They believed that Heaven's and Cliff would be poisoned to death, but it was all for naught. As for removing the petrification, I wouldn't have come if I couldn't do it. Qin Hao reached out his palm as his body floated 3 feet above the ground. He pressed his palm against the boulder's top. A crystalline stream of water began to spread from his palm and slowly flowed onto the boulder's body. Wherever the water flowed, the seemingly sturdy stone statue began to crack inch by inch, revealing the fresh skin and flesh within. What pure water elemental energy! Yi Shuihan licked his lips as he watched from the side in admiration. Every time Boss made a move, it was worthy of admiration. Siowa nodded in agreement. Ka 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 ka. The cracks on the stone statue finally extended from the top of its head to the bottom of its feet. Following that, large chunks of stone fell off. With a loud bang, Qin Yun and Huangpu Huichun were completely unsealed. Ha ha, I never expected that Huangpu Huichun, would return alive. Bang! There was another dull thud. The old demon flew up and slapped Huangpu Huichun's head in anger, killing him instantly. Huangpu Huichun's eyes widened as his neck bent. He was dead. However, he did not collapse, because his body was being held by someone. What happened? My essence soul's power has been unsealed? The voice was filled with astonishment and doubt. Following that, Qin Yun slowly regained consciousness. His dim eyes were filled with vitality. But when he saw Qin Hao standing in front of him, he was alarmed. "Leave. Why aren't you leaving? Run." Qin Yun screamed like a madman. He did not know that Huangpu Huichun had become a corpse in his arms. His arms held on to Huangpu Huichun tighter and tighter. He gritted his teeth and looked at Qin Hao with an anxious gaze. This scene was truly moving. It also made Aku, who was beside him, cry silently. "It's okay. My cousin is fine now." Qin Hao choked with sobs as he pried Qin Yun's arm away. He did not dare to use too much force for fear of hurting Qin Yun. Although Qin Yun's petrification had been dispelled, his injuries remained. "Idiot!" Aka finally mustered his courage and walked in front of Qin Yun. "Young Ku, why are you here?" "You?" Qin Yun was stunned. Only now did he realize that he was not at Duan Long Cliff. He was surrounded by martial artists. Looking at the situation, it seemed to be an auction house. Some of the people here looked at him with eyes full of respect. They were Qin Hao subordinates. As for the vast majority of warriors, their eyes were filled with fear as they looked at Qin Yun. These were all warriors who had come bid. "Let's go, old cousin. Let's go to the blood abyss. Today, all enmity will end. On the way, I will tell you everything that happened here." Qin Hao smiled and finally separated the dazed Qin Yun from Huangpu Huichun's corpse. With a push of his hand, the corpse fell to the ground. "And everyone present, I will kindly advise you. No matter who you are, do not meddle in other people's business. Quickly return where you came from, because the wasteland is about to change." After Qin Hao finished speaking, he nodded towards Xiaogua. Xiaogua strode forward and took out a bamboo tube from his sleeve. He aimed it at the broken roof of the auction house and suddenly pulled the tube's lead. Shio! A resplendent light erupted and soared into the sky. Following that, everyone saw dazzling fireworks exploding in the sky. This was the agreement between Qin Hao and the warriors on the border. Once the signal was sent out, an hour later, tens of millions of troops would launch an all-out attack on the wasteland. At that time, Qin Hao would lead all the experts present to the blood abyss. This would definitely alarm the leaders of the three races and their most elite forces. A great battle would break out between both sides. The most elite forces of the three races would be tied down. The ordinary soldiers left in the cities would have weak defenses and would be defeated in a single blow. Therefore, Qin Hao warned the hundreds of thousands of warriors present not to meddle in other people's business when the time came, lest they be treated as the remnants of the three races and killed by the allied forces of the four empires. That's right. Now that the roles had been reversed, the three races were the remnants. As he spoke, Danji's group of elders, the merchant union's martialists, and the 500 yuan monarchs all raised their yuan qi at the same time. In front of hundreds of thousands of people, the scene was indescribably shocking. Hidden in the middle of the scarlet flames were several balls of purple light flickering. These were the yuan qi of the old demon, Dan Xian, Yao Lao, and Shun Tianfeng, who said that Qin Hao did not have yuan venerates by his side. In fact, he had just disdained to deal with Shiman Gang. Oh my god, this time, the three races are completely finished. The hundreds of thousands of martialists looked up at the balls of light rising into the sky and were extremely shocked. They could not help but find Shiman Gang's words funny. Comparing foundations? No matter how strong the foundations of the three races were, they would not be able to withstand so many Yuan monarchs and Yuan venerates. Thank you for your reminder, young Master Qin. I am eternally grateful. Thank you, young Master Qin, for showing mercy and sparing our lives. We'll take our leave now. Since this matter did not concern them, the martialists immediately fled faster than rabbits. In that case, I will also take my leave. Old Black, let's go. Nalan Ertai wiped the sweat off his face and called out to the dark-faced old man beside him. Wait, the others can leave, but you have to stay. Qin Hao pointed at Nalan Ertai, Wang Go, Zhu Bolong, and Liu Bang before looking at the Heaven's End cliff. What are you waiting for? Is the poison not cured? Boom! The chains and shackles on the heavens in Cliff's hands exploded. He let out a tiger-like roar, and his level 8 Yuan Monarch aura rose to its peak. He raised his fist and rushed toward the panicking Nalan Urtai and the others. You bullied my daughter, and even wanted me to chop you into pieces. Die! What followed was a series of mournful screams. Qin Hao looked down and smirked. He took out his halberd and tossed it to Qin Yun. Cousin, can you still fight with me? Yes. Qin Yun was extremely excited. Blood Abyss. It was very close to the Heaven's End Cliff. It was located at the old site of the Great Qing Imperial Palace. The entrance was actually the former Imperial Court. Now, it had become a wasteland with dilapidated walls and overgrown weeds. Hey, brothers, do you know? Today is the start of the triennial Yihong auction. I heard that a few elders said that Dan Gu brought a miraculous elixir called the Saint Soul Elixir. I also heard that that elixir can raise any level below the heavenly sage level. It does not need to be refined, and one can level up in a second. I think it must be fake. Fake? How can the elixir produced by Dan Gu be fake? Yes, it must be real. I really want to go and see such a miraculous elixir and then buy one for myself. More than a dozen guards from the three clans sat on the ground lazily, leaning against a broken wall of the imperial court as they discussed the auction. They were looking forward to it. The auction must be very lively, right? Unfortunately, they could not go. They were not disciples of the three clans, not even from the side branches. They were just low-level martial artists that had been adopted. Want to see the Saint Soul Elixir? Easy, I will send you there. Chapter 855. These guards are the lowest-ranked warriors sent by the three races to the entrance of the Blood Abyss. All of them were mortal saints. They didn't realize that the enemies were approaching them until one of their heads was cut off. Everyone was shocked. They jumped up and drew their swords and sabers. Back to back, they nervously formed a circle and looked around vigilantly. Who is it? The captain pretended to be calm and shouted. In the next second, Wong, Wong, Wong. In the quiet surroundings, the space began to fluctuate, forming circular ripples. Then, they saw balls of crimson flames descending from the sky. In the blink of an eye, the empty wilderness was filled with figures. The essence chi of each of them was at the king level. Their cultivation was 100 times more powerful than theirs. Enemies like them were everywhere. They stood in the middle of the grass, on the broken walls, and on the stone steps. They looked at the dozens of pitiful mortal saints as if they were looking at ants. In addition, there were 4 other figures shining with purple light. They floated above their heads like gods. Their powerful auras suppressed them to the point where they couldn't raise their heads. Their bodies trembled violently. The guards were so scared that they lost their will to fight. Even the sword in the captain's hand fell to the ground. I'm the one who will send you to hell. Aku, who had attacked, showed no mercy. Her beautiful face turned cold as she quickly rushed over. Her body was like a nimble cat as she circled in the middle of the guards. Sword light flashed as she moved. Plop, plop. Heads flew up. The dozens of mortal saint guards couldn't fight back at all. Their bodies fell to the ground. Akka wouldn't show any mercy to the people of the 3 races. At this time, Qin Hao came from behind. He was holding a person on each side. Xiaojun was on the left, and Xiaolei was on the right. He looked at the broken scene in front of him. This was the place where the officials used to kneel and worship the emperor. Now it was in ruins. Even the walls had collapsed. Only a broken throne stood at the end. It was covered by grass and gave off a sad sound as if it was telling everyone the past. This is your home. Your home. Qin Hao looked to the left and then to the right. He shook his head and let go of Xiaolei and Xiaojun's beasts. He wondered if the Daqin imperial court in the East Continent would be reduced to the same state after he left. Sis, is this really our home? Xiaojun was a little nervous. He stuttered and choked with sobs, looking at Xiaolei with resistance in his eyes. Ever since he was young, he didn't know where he came from. He also couldn't remember what his parents looked like. In his impression, it was his sister who brought him up. Although he vaguely felt that he was different from others, He had never thought that his real home would be like this. He hoped that his sister would say, "Not here. That's right, it's our home. The descendants of Puyang have returned," Xiao Lei said with tears in her eyes. She took Xiao Juan's hand and knelt in front of the broken throne in the weeds. "Xiao Jun, kowtow with me." Although it was her first time returning to her homeland, she was not a child. She knew what she should do and what she should bear. Qin Hao nodded. He would let the brother and sister get familiar with each other and accept it slowly. Then Qin Hao walked slowly to the center of the imperial court. There were 4 broken marble pillars. The pillars were carved with flying dragons. The dragon heads were domineering, and the scales were vaguely discernible. They were vivid and lifelike. One could see how mighty the Qing dynasty was when it was at its peak 2,000 years ago. Qin Hao thought that if the Qing dynasty hadn't collapsed, Luo Shui wouldn't have been able to dominate the western Liang 1,000 years later. In the center of the 4 pillars was a deep pit with a radius of 50 meters. Looking down, it was deep and dark like the mouth of a beast. He couldn't see the bottom. Qin Hao put his hands behind his back and summoned the red lotus fire spirit in his body. His eyes seemed to be burning and turned into 2 bloody flames. The bloody flames shot out 2 red lines and disappeared into the deep pit. It was as if he had opened his heavenly eye and carefully inspected the deep pit. Within the deep pit, Qin Hao saw a layer of barrier that blocked the entrance to the bottom of the pit. The barrier was occasionally suffused with a pile of mottled red dots. Undoubtedly, this was the grand formation that the 3 patriarchs had jointly set up. "Master, they're here." At this moment, the old demon's voice reminded him. Qin Hao immediately put away the red lotus fire spirit and looked up at the distant sky. The clear sky suddenly darkened under an inexplicable force. Accompanied by the crackling of thunder, a large mass of dark clouds was rapidly approaching the blood abyss. "They're not slow." The corners of Qin Hao's mouth curled up, revealing a trace of contempt in his smile. The dark clouds that swept over were the patriarchs of the 3 clans, as well as the elites of the 3 clans. Moreover, Qin Hao spread out his emperor-grade psychic energy and clearly sensed that the elites of the other 3 races were still rushing over from various cities. It was obvious that the 3 patriarchs had gone to the Yihong auction house and seen Shimin Gang's corpse. They had realized the severity of the situation. "Master, Yao Lao, Senior Shun, I'll leave the 3 patriarchs to you." Qin Hao's cold gaze swept over all the king-level experts, including the Merchant Union, the Elixir Pavilion, Qi Xiaohua, and Han Man. They were all ready for battle, full of fighting spirit. "Kill them all." Qin Hao waved his arm. "Kill!" Yao Lao roared and turned into a purple shooting star. He took the lead and flew toward the dark clouds. The Yuan venerate martialist's powerful Yuan Qi shook the earth. Dan Xian and Shun Tianfeng were not slow either as they followed closely behind. Behind them, Zhen Kaiwa, the group of elders, and 500 Yuan monarchs charged forward without hesitation. "Chairman, Vice Chairman, we don't have the slightest bit of strength." Seeing that the 2 sides were about to engage in a bloody battle, one of the Commerce Union's counselors trembled and looked pleadingly at Hai Dafu and Jin Yushuan. Thanks to their relationship with Qin Hao, Hai Dafu and Jin Yushuan had joined forces and successfully been promoted to chairman and vice chairman respectively. They were in charge of the entire Commerce Union. Unfortunately, these fat men of the Commerce Union were ordinary people. However, if they did not contribute, would the chairman and vice chairman be displeased? "That's right, Chairman. All the counselors have no cultivation base at all. Why don't we leave some people behind to protect them?" A commander of the Commerce Union's guard suggested. "No need. Everyone except the counselors will attack. Don't blame me for being impolite if you dare to embarrass the Commerce Union. Also, I want to tell you slaves that besides the Saint Soul Elixir, young Master Qin Hao also has the Saint King Elixir that can help Yuan monarchs advance. You can figure out yourselves." Before Hai Dafu could say anything, Jin Yushuan hurriedly gave the order. His fat fists were clenched tightly as he bared his teeth and roared angrily. He stared at the dark clouds with bloodshot eyes as though the three clan leaders in the dark clouds were his enemies who had killed his father. He had already met Qin Hao one step later than Haidafu. He could not give Haidafu any chance to make a contribution. In his heart, he was stronger than Haidafu. Saint King Elixir, the commander of the guards, trembled and immediately drew his heavy saber with a swoosh. He pointed at the dark clouds and said, "Brothers of the Commerce Union, charge." There was a loud rumble. More than 100 martial artists belonging to the Commerce Union moved out. They turned into streams of light and ran for their lives. Everyone was as excited as mad dogs. Originally, they had only signed an agreement with the Commerce Union to protect the counselors. They had never said that they would risk their lives. Therefore, they felt that there was no need to risk their lives to fight the three clans for Qin Hao. Chapter 856. Below Haidafu and Jin Yuxuan, the guards of the remaining 10 counselors ran away in an instant. They were completely out of control. The faces of the 10 counselors started to sweat nervously as they quickly moved closer to Qin Hao's position. If they were unlucky enough to encounter any of the three races, even a trashy Yuan master or Yuan gathering martialist would be able to kill them all. Qin Hao was the only martialist left. "Young Master Qin Hao, I have admired you for a long time. You are so handsome. Actually, I have long wanted to serve you, like Chairman Hai and Vice Chairman Jin." The 10 adorable, yet pitiful fatties kept flattering Qin Hao. They were just short of swearing an oath to serve Qin Hao wholeheartedly. Regarding this, Qin Hao silently gave Jin Yuxuan a thumbs up. Jin Yuxuan looked pleased as he raised his head proudly at Haidafu. Haidafu chuckled, raised his hand, and shook his head. "Big brother, we are going to. Boss, I am going to. Alliance Master, Haman is going to. Junior brother Qin Hao, watch as I, Yi Wuhan, personally behead the heads of the three patriarchs." Xiaogua, Yi Shuihan, and the others were excited as they joined the battle in the sky. Qin Hao did not say anything. Besides Hanman, Qin Hao was very assured about the strength of the others. It was difficult to meet a worthy opponent below the Yuan Venerate level. Even if they were caught in a chaotic battle, their ability to protect themselves was more than enough. Haman was not a fool either. He would not be so foolish as to challenge the patriarchs of the three races. What Qin Hao had to do next was to break open the seal array in the pit beneath his feet. At the moment, the elite troops of the two factions were exchanging fire in the sky far away. There was no need for words. Dangu and the Merchant Union had to complete the mission assigned by Qin Hao. They had to avenge the people of the three races who had died at the Yihong auction house. The two sides fought fiercely, not stopping until one of them was dead. In an instant, the group of Dangu elders led by Yao Lao rushed into the crowd of the three clans. The tyrannical purple Yuan Qi wreaked havoc, and the people of the three clans who were affected directly exploded, turning into a rain of blood. Their internal organs and limbs fell to the ground one after another. However, Yao Lao's reckless behavior did not last for more than 2 breaths before he was stopped by a middle-aged man in black. The two of them hovered opposite each other, ignoring the chaotic battle around them and coldly staring at each other. This tall middle-aged man was the patriarch of the Shiman family. He had a peak 5th-level Yuan Venerate cultivation, and a layer of purple flames flickered around his body. His face was filled with righteous indignation, and his lips were purple as he pointed at Yao Lao and bellowed, "Why?" Patriarch Shiman couldn't understand why Dangu and the Merchant Alliance would slaughter the three races like this. "Is it enough for the Qin people?" Yao Lao replied coldly as his hands quickly formed a series of hand seals in front of him. They were both Yuan Venerates. Even though his opponent was 1 cultivation level lower than him, Yao Lao didn't dare be careless and used his full strength right from the start. After all, every Yuan Venerate martialist wasn't that easy to kill. Yuan Venerates already had a preliminary spirit consciousness. Even if their physical body was destroyed, their spirit consciousness could still survive. If they escaped, there would be endless trouble in the future. That's enough. Patriarch Shiman smirked as he instantly understood the reason. In that case, they could only fight. He extended his thick palm to the side and grasped a 9-foot-long blade in the void. Then, he viciously slashed at Yao Lao. The blade light blossomed and whistled. The blade chi wreaked havoc along the way, killing nearly a dozen heavenly saints of the three clans before it surged toward Zhun, Kaiwa, and the others. Be careful. Upon seeing this, Dan Xian swept out a ball of Yuan Qi and sent Zhun Kaiwa and a few other elders out of the area. Zhun Kaiwa was so frightened that he broke out in a cold sweat. He secretly felt that he had been too close. Before he could thank Dan Xian, he turned pale and screamed, "Deputy Pavilion Master!" Dan Xian, who had just sent Zhun Kaiwa and the others away, was greeted by a huge fist shadow. This fist shadow transformed into a purple fist that was as large as a water tank and imprinted itself on Dan Xian's chest. Dan Xian's internal organs churned from this blow, and he nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he forcefully swallowed it back down in the end. His short figure stood straight and tall. This seemingly powerful punch didn't even make Dan Xian retreat by half a step. Not bad. A peak level 7 Yuan Monarch. I really didn't expect that the three clans would actually have such an expert in this trashy wasteland. However, it's a pity for you. Dan Xian shook his head. Then he squinted his eyes in an unparalleled vigorous force, as if a sleeping lion had awoken, shot out from his chest. An even more turbulent purple flame aura erupted from his body. This flame aura shook the surrounding space and shattered it like glass, causing the void to wail. Naturally, the owner of the fist was also sent flying. A peak Yuan Venerate? How is this possible? This was a burly man in purple shorts. His upper body was bare and his face was extremely rugged. He was very tall and looked very fierce. There was a green dragon tattooed on his left pectoral muscle, a white tiger tattooed on his right pectoral muscle, and a roaring bison tattooed on his six-pack abs. He was the patriarch of the Dugu family and the one with the highest cultivation among the three patriarchs. If he punched out unexpectedly, he would most likely hit elder traditional Chinese medicine or Shun Tianfeng. That would definitely cost him dearly. However, he was too unlucky to have picked a Dan Xian, who looked weak but was actually a peak Yuan Venerate. Dan Xian was already half a step into the Yuan Venerate level. Even the Yuan Venerate Tian Daoyuo, who had returned from the northern borders beheading Moon Mansion and regarded Yao Lao and Shun Tianfeng as insignificant ants, had once praised Dan Xian. Therefore, the Dugu family's patriarch was really unlucky. At the same time, Patriarch Shiman's 100-feet-long blade light also landed on Yao Lao's head. Yao Lao's waving hands suddenly stopped. His beard fluttered as he pushed his hands forward and shouted, "Pills in all directions!" Whoosh! Whoosh! In an instant, countless illusory medicinal pellets shot out from between his hands, covering the sky and covering the earth as they randomly pierced through the air. These illusory elixir pills were only the size of beans when they first left his hands. However, after flying out, they turned into huge boulders and solidified. This was Yao Lao's signature move. Bang! 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 There was a series of explosions as the huge boulders collided with the blade light. Amid the sparks, cracks gradually appeared on the blade light before it shattered, disintegrated, and disappeared. The huge elixir pills that filled the sky immediately bombarded many martialists of the three clans. Anyone who was hit would explode in the air. Patriarch Shiman undoubtedly suffered the most attacks. About a dozen huge elixir pills smashed into his chest, causing him to spit out a big mouthful of blood. "You old alchemist, I'll fight you to the death." Patriarch Shiman had already suffered serious injuries. He could not retreat, so he roared and raised his blade ferociously. Regarding this, Yao Lao shook his head. The outcome was already decided. Shun Tianfeng's opponent was Patriarch Huang Pu, the 8th-grade venerable alchemist who had poisoned Duantian Cliff's father and daughter. Unlike Patriarch Shiman and Patriarch Dugu, Patriarch Huang Pu was an old man. "I have a divine elixir pill that can bring the dead back to life. Sir, are you willing to accept it? The old man's face was calm, as if the fight beside him had nothing to do with him. He stroked his beard and smiled at Shun Tianfeng. I'll kill you with one sword. Shen Tianfeng patted himself on the back. Whoosh, 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 a simple and unadorned longsword flew above his head. With a whoosh, the long sword that flew up unfurled like a fan, forming over 1,000 sword lights that flickered in the air like fish scales. It was a spectacular sight. Chapter 857. Thousands of sword lights responded excitedly. The swords moved horizontally, and the tips of the swords pierced forward again and again. They were like a group of wild horses that were about to lose control. With a wave of Shun Tianfeng's hand, the old man opposite him would become a hedgehog. Sir, you really don't need old man's resurrection pill. You have no regrets in your life. Think about your family, disciples, lovers, and friends. None of them are worth your concern. Patriarch Huang Pu said sincerely. There was no fighting spirit in his body. His eyes were full of benevolence, as if he couldn't wait to save the world. As he spoke, he reached out a hand to Shun Tianfeng, holding a pill in his palm. The pill shone with a sacred purple-gold light. This was his so-called resurrection pill. Patriarch Huang Pu held the resurrection pill and approached Shun Tianfeng step by step. He was not afraid of being killed. His voice was full of temptation. He handed the pill to Shun Tianfeng. Look into my eyes. They're sincere, right? Take the resurrection pill. It can make up for the regrets in your heart. Take it, and you can save your friends and family. It is exactly what you need to save your family and friends. Don't resist. Shiren. In a daze, Shun Tianfeng's expression changed. The sword qi around him dissipated, and his eyes became dull. The scene of Xingyue Academy appeared in his mind. Shiren had smashed his own head and knelt in front of Shen Tianfeng. At that moment, he was using his actions to ask for Shun Tianfeng's forgiveness. Shun Tianfeng knew that Shiren still regarded him as a friend. I want to save him. I want to save Shiren. Shen Tianfeng lost himself. He muttered and reached out to grab Patriarch Huang Pu's palm. Patriarch Huang Pu smiled. His kind face suddenly turned into a ferocious ghost. What he held in his palm was not the resurrection pill, but a gloomy butcher's knife. Shen Tianfeng was hit by his mind-reading technique. Patriarch Huang Pu viciously slashed at Shun Tianfeng's neck. Petty tricks. How dare you show off in front of Second Master? Die. At this critical moment, a green hat came out of nowhere and fell on Patriarch Huang Pu's head. Patriarch Huang Pu was shocked. He looked up and saw that the hat was not ordinary. His butcher's knife that was slashing at Shun Tianfeng changed direction and slashed to the hat. Bang! Slashing the hat. The hat's source spirit was not injured at all. However, this slash also sent the hat flying back to the old demon's head. Grand Elder Xian Shao. Seeing who it was, Patriarch Huang Pu was stunned for a moment. Then his eyes lit up with joy. But then, the surprise was swept away. Grand Supreme, your sister. The old demon cursed angrily. Seeing that Shun Tianfeng was still in a daze, he slapped him in the face and woke him up. Shun Tianfeng felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. When he woke up, he shivered and immediately glared at the Huangpu tribe leader. He stomped his feet and shouted, "Bastard, die!" With a raise of his hand, the 10,000 returning swords shot towards the other party. Originally, a small mind-reading technique could not do anything to him. It was only because Shun Tianfeng was worried about Sunset Blade that he fell for the other party's unorthodox trick. At this moment, he joined forces with the old demon to attack clan leader Huang Pu. Supreme Elder Xin Shao, are you crazy? Clan leader Dugu, your second uncle is crazy. Hurry up and take him back. Clan leader Huang Pu screamed in fright. He turned around and flew toward the battle between clan leader Dugu and Dan Xian. His cultivation was the trashiest Yuan venerate. He could refine pills but was not good at fighting. It was already very difficult to deal with Shun Tianfeng. With the addition of the old demon, It would be strange if he did not run. While they were fighting fiercely, Qin Hao also started to break the blood abyss great array. After standing at the edge of the huge pit and observing for a long time, Qin Hao gradually found a way to break the great array. However, he frowned slightly as he looked at the two sides fighting in the distance and saw the blood flying in the air. What's wrong? Don't tell me that you can't break this small array. That's absolutely impossible. Mu Yue's voice was heard. Vivian flew out of the interspatial ring and stood beside Qin Hao. When the group of fatties from the Merchant Alliance saw this, they tactfully retreated far away. They hugged each other tightly and hid in the grass. They closed their eyes and didn't dare to look in Mu Yue and Qin Hao's direction. Mu Yue frowned. She did not understand what this group of fatties were afraid of. She would not kill them. They were really as timid as mice. She then stared seriously at Qin Hao's face. Even if his appearance had changed, as long as it was Qin Hao, she would never get tired of looking at him. In the past, breaking this array would have been more difficult than ascending to the heavens. But now, Qin Hao smiled and pointed at the two sides fighting in the sky. I need the blood of the 3 clan leaders. This sealing array was very similar to the array set up by the Qin family's patriarch at the bottom of Broken Dragon Cliff. It should have been imitated by the 3 clans. Therefore, it needed the blood of the person who set up the array to break it. How much do you need? Vivian asked as she took out a basin from her interspatial ring. 1 drop per person is enough. Qin Hao was a little surprised. Give me 3 breaths. I will be back soon. Vivian carried the basin and disappeared into thin air. When she reappeared, she was already in the sky where the battle was taking place. Clan leader Dugu, your second uncle has gone crazy. Hurry up and put him back in the circle. Clan leader Huangpu screamed. He was chased by 2 strong gusts of wind as he flew toward clan leader Dugu. However, halfway through his flight, a powerful force suddenly flashed in front of him. It was like a wall of air that came out of nowhere and stopped him. Clan Master Huangpu didn't have time to react and bumped into Ji Hao. His body trembled violently. Then he fell down and sat in midair. Let me borrow your blood. A woman's voice sounded. Clan leader Huangpu did not even have time to react. With a rip, his left arm was torn off by an external force. Blood spurted out from the wound, and clan leader Huangpu screamed in pain. Under the control of an unknown force, the splashing blood quickly gathered together and fell into Vivian's basin. Vivian disappeared again and reappeared beside clan leader Dugu. It's your turn. Chila. Clan leader Dugu's right arm was suddenly torn off. He was fighting with Dan Xian. The unexpected change made him scream as if he had seen a ghost. He did not even notice that there was an enemy hiding beside him. He did not even see what the enemy looked like. However, his arm was torn off by the enemy. At this moment, Vivian came to clan leader Shiman. Clan leader Shiman was knocked back by Yao Lao's pills. Similarly, he did not notice Vivian's approach. When he noticed, his legs were already separated from his body. Here, is it enough? Vivian returned to Qin Hao's side. She held a basin of fresh blood in her small hands and raised it in front of Qin Hao. Qin Hao did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, he did not waste any time. He lifted the basin with 1 finger and threw it forward. Splash! The basin of fresh blood poured into the deep pit and disappeared without a trace. Break! Qin Hao stomped on the ground and created a circle of dust. He waved his hands in front of him and made a series of strange movements. A large number of runes flew out and flew into the pit. When these runes fell into the pit and collided with the barrier was drenched in blood. Boom! There was an earth-shattering explosion. The barrier exploded and a devastating force spread to the ground. The ground was torn open and formed a series of deep trenches. How is this possible? The ceiling formation has been broken? Who broke it? Other than us 3 clan leaders, there is someone else who can see through our formation. The injured clan leaders were shocked. The sounds of battle also stopped at this moment. Both sides looked toward the blood abyss. They saw a white-haired young man at the entrance of the blood abyss. The young man had his hands behind his back and was as graceful as a god. Rumble. A dull sound rang out from the deep pit, and the earth trembled. It was as if countless terrifying monsters were running out of the pit. However, Qin Hao's gaze had been on them the entire time, not shifting in the slightest. At the same time, they were also attracted by Qin Hao. After the first glance, the man and woman's bodies suddenly stiffened, and tears began to gush out like a fountain. "How, warrior, how?" The man timidly stretched out his hand, wondering if he was dreaming. Thump! Qin Hao knelt down heavily. "Father." Vivian watched silently and took a few steps back. She couldn't bear to disturb them. As Dinda's reincarnation, Qin Hao didn't have to do that. However, Vivian knew that if it weren't for Qin Hao's body, Dinda wouldn't have survived. She knelt down. The parents of the body could bear it. At the same time, figures continued to fly out of the pit. After the members of the Qin family came out, another group of strange men and women appeared. These men and women looked similar to the members of the Qin family. They were strange because their pupils were blood red. When they appeared, they immediately looked bloodthirsty. Their lips opened, revealing two sharp teeth, and they looked at the battle in the sky with a crazed expression. There was no doubt that they were the sealed vampires. There weren't many of them, but they were obviously larger than the members of the Qin family. There were about 1,000 of them. The strangest one was the one standing in the middle. The others were dirty and messy, but the one standing in the middle of the vampires was wearing clean, tight-fitting clothes with a white bow tied around his neck. Even his pants were tied tightly, outlining his well-proportioned body. He looked like a man in his early 20s. He had an elegant face. Grandpa Patriarch. Aku was very excited. She rushed forward and bowed to the handsome and elegant man. "Hey, you're Aku, the child of Wang Yaowen and a human woman?" The patriarch of the vampires said. He was actually 800 years old. "How long has it been since we last met? When I woke up, you've already grown so big. Let Grandpa check your body to see if you're malnourished." As he spoke, the patriarch of the vampires opened his arms to Aku. Aku's face suddenly turned sour. She quickly dodged and stuck out her tongue at the patriarch. "This little girl doesn't know what's good for her." The patriarch of the vampires scolded jokingly. He actually wanted to give Aku a drop of blood essence so that she could inherit his bloodline and become the most noble vampire. From then on, she would no longer be discriminated against by the vampires. After all, it wasn't easy for Aku to survive after being sealed for so long. However, he wasn't in a hurry to give the blood essence. When the patriarch of the vampires saw Aku dodging, he flew to Qin Jindong's side and looked at the patriarch of the vampires who was still alive. He laughed and said, "You didn't expect that I would allow a member of the Qin family to live, right? In fact, it's all thanks to you guys." Chapter 859. This battle was finally over. After the deaths of the 3 clan leaders, the remaining clan members resisted for less than half an hour. Following that, an army that blotted out the sky and covered the earth whizzed over from all directions. It was a vast and mighty sea. Luo Shui, Western Wei, Western Zhao, Sky Dragon, and Qin Hao's clan's personal army made up a total of 5 empires. There were more than 15 legions and tens of millions of people. This scene deeply shocked the members of the Blood Clan and Qin Jindong's clan. After the meeting, the legions of each nation and the leader of the Royal Knights of Western Zhao all paid their respects to Qin Hao. On the same day, they handed over the Qin dynasty's territory to Western Qin and led their own troops back to their home territory. The personal army of the Qin family did not leave. Qi Daxiong led the Furious Bear Legion to repair the ruins in all aspects. Although the repair work could not be completed in a short time, these burly men, who were all over 2 meters tall, built a row of wooden houses for the Qin family members and the Blood Clan to live in temporarily. Qin Hao deliberately took 3 days off to accompany his father and mother, Tang Rong, instead of rushing to the north. At this moment, All the higher-ups were gathered in the grandest wooden house. Among them were Qin Hao's men, members of the Qin family, and members of the Blood Clan. This is my son, Qin Hao. He's 19 this year. This is my son, Qin Hao. This is my son, a Yuan King expert. Auntie, this is my son. Uncle, this is my son, Qin Hao. Qin Dingtian held Qin Hao's hand and introduced him to the members of the Qin family. He had a happy smile on his face and looked extremely proud. Every time he met someone, Qin Hao would take the initiative to greet them. I didn't expect that a small branch of the Qin family that wandered outside would nurture such an outstanding man. It's really our clan's fortune. Qin Jindong, the chief of the main bloodline, stroked his beard with admiration. If it weren't for Qin Hao's huge army of reinforcements, who knew when they would be able to return to the outside world, this was all thanks to Qin Hao. We're all Qin people. Old master, you're exaggerating. All right, I have something for you. Qin Hao smiled humbly and took out the dragon-slaying sword from his spatial ring. This sword was Qin Jindong's sword. Back then, Qin Yun's younger brother Qin had his head crushed by Dugu Jin's foot in order to protect this sword. Today, it was returned to its rightful owner. At first, I was curious and guessed what material it was made of, but I couldn't see through it. Today, I suddenly remembered that it should be your life origin artifact, right? Qin Hao held his sword with both hands and presented it to his opponent, as expected of an outstanding man of the Qin people. Good eyesight. That's right, the Dragon Slayer's sword is old man's natal weapon. Qin Jindong reached out his hand and took it. The moment his palm touched the rusty sword, it suddenly shone brightly. Unparalleled sword qi began to wreak havoc as if it had come alive. Qin Jindong hurriedly controlled the sword with his mind. The Dragon Slayer sword turned into a wisp of white gas and disappeared into his dantian. The so-called life origin artifact was a weapon forged by the warrior's will, nourished by the warrior's essence and blood, and connected with the warrior's life. The success rate of forging was extremely low, and it was hard to find one in 10,000. However, once it was completed, its power was not to be underestimated. It was twice as powerful as an ordinary illusory weapon. More importantly, only the owner could exert its real power. As long as the warrior didn't die, the life origin artifact wouldn't be destroyed. However, if the life origin artifact was destroyed in the battle because the opponent was too powerful, the warrior's life wouldn't be in danger. However, the price was not small. It would lead to a serious injury or even a regression in cultivation level and the loss of the life origin artifact. I also didn't expect that you could forge the life origin artifact that all warriors dream of. You're really envious of us. Qin Hao also praised him. These words were said very sincerely. Every martial artist that forged a life origin artifact was an extremely powerful character. Their willpower was strong, far surpassing others. Compared to Qin Hao's third form of the Great Void Cauldron, the pain he suffered was far less than Qin Jindong's when he forged the life origin artifact. Qin Jindong laughed happily. The more he looked at Qin Hao, the more he liked him. This child was not only upright, loyal, and filial, but also had a glib tongue. After chatting with the old master of the main bloodline for a while, Qin Hao gave a look to Dan Xian, Yao Lao, and the old demon. Then he pulled his parents and mother, called Xiaolei and Xiao Jun, and walked out with them. What's wrong, Hao? Qin Dingtian had never been so happy before. He had a lot of things to say to everyone, but he didn't know why his son pulled him out. Father, it's time for me to go. Qin Hao let out a light breath and looked at Tang Rong with reluctant eyes. Xiao Han was still waiting for him at the northern borders. Qin Hao hadn't seen her for almost 4 years, and he really didn't want to waste any more time. He had also mentioned this matter to his father and mother. Mother might be reluctant to let you leave her side, but Xiao Han grew up in our east courtyard. No matter how powerful her background is or how unreachable it is, she is still Mother's child. So go ahead. No matter how big the storm is, spread your wings and fly with all your might. Bring Xiao Han back. Your father and I will be waiting for you at home. Tang Rong turned around and couldn't help but use her sleeve to wipe her tears. She had just reunited with Qin Hao. To be honest, she really wasn't willing to let him go. But she could see clearly that her son had grown up and had dreams and pursuits. So, her son shouldn't be restricted. What she and her husband could do was to cheer their son on and encourage him to chase after everything he wanted. However, remember, regardless of whether Xiao Han's father is Emperor Yuan or Daliao's Emperor Xiao, as a junior, you can respect him. But as a man of the Qin family, you can't lose your dignity. Do you understand? Qin Dingtian instantly turned solemn as he stroked Qin Hao's head with heartfelt words. Son understands. Qin Hao bit his lips and nodded seriously. His father was afraid that he would be too cowardly and lose his masculinity because of Emperor Yuan's identity. If Emperor Yuan treated Qin Hao as his son-in-law, Qin Hao should respect him. But if Xiaoi put on airs and looked down on Qin Hao, Qin Dingtian meant there's no need to give him face. Qin Hao understood this. Since that's the case, you have to be careful in everything you do. If you can endure it, try to keep a low profile. Beijiang is not Shiliang, and Daliao is not Luo Shui. You are unfamiliar with the place and have no relatives. If something really happens, no one can help you. Kid, I'm leaving first. Remember, you're Qi Yang's disciple. Yao Lao was most afraid of parting. He stomped his feet and flew in the direction of Luo Shui. Don't listen to his nonsense. You can bear with it once, but not twice. If there's a third time, no matter who the other party is, beat them up until their mother can't recognize them. I, Dan Xian's disciple, can't be bullied by others. At most, you can send a letter, and I'll go to Beijiang and slaughter their whole family. Dan Xian was fuming. Although he said that, his eyes were full of worry. And, whether it was Yao Lao's advice or his master's protection, Qin Hao was very touched. Then, he looked at Qin Dingtian and said, Father, after I leave, King Qi will bring you back to our home. Grandfather and fourth uncle are waiting for you to reunite. As for here, with Grandfather Jindong's prestige in the wasteland, it won't be difficult for the Qin family to recruit new people. As for the two of you, Qin Hao looked at Xiaolei and Xiao Jun. Be obedient, especially you, Xiao Jun. From now on, you're no longer an ordinary child. You're the future king of Great Qin. Woo-woo, I don't care. I'm a child. I won't let you go. Chapter 860. Xiao Jun, listen to me. Come to me. Xiaolei forcefully separated the two and stood aside. Her eyes told Qin Hao, go. Be careful. Qin Hao nodded and looked inside the wooden house. He saw Qi Daxiong, Caiogua, and Yi Shuihan chatting with the main bloodline and the Blood Clan members. I won't say goodbye to the others. Old demon, send me and Wei Wei to the northern border. Then, he held Wei Wei's hand tightly. There was still more than half a year before the agreement with Xiao Han. Qin Hao wanted to explore and familiarize himself with Daliao's culture. Therefore, he didn't plan to bring Caiogua and the others. As for Wei Wei, he didn't explain much to his parents. He just told them with his eyes, she's very important to me. Qin Hao didn't say anything, so they didn't ask. In short, they liked whoever their son liked. Wei Wei's ears turned red when Qin Hao held her hand so intimately in front of her parents. She lowered her head slightly and bowed to Qin Dingtian and Tang Rong. Go. Don't dawdle. Qin Dingtian suddenly turned around and urged Qin Hao with a determined face. He was afraid that if his son didn't leave now, he might go back on his words and not let him go. Kid, remember, if you encounter any trouble, send me a message immediately. I'll be there in less than 3 days. I'll give you a message, Jade Scroll. Keep it well. Dan Xin clenched his teeth and flew into the sky. He might be worried, but he was confident in Qin Hao's abilities. Go! The old demon raised his hand and swept out a purple radiance. Kacha! The purple radiance tore a crack in space. The three of them jumped into the crack, and the crack closed. Qin Dingtian and Tang Rong could no longer see their son's figure. It was only then that everyone in the house reacted and ran out. However, you must protect yourself. Mom will wait for you to bring Xiao Han back. Tang Rong covered her face with her hands and leaned into her husband's embrace, her tears falling like rain. Along with the dissipation of Qin Hao's aura, Xiaohua and Yi Shuihan were stunned for a very long time. Only after a very long time did they come back to their senses. They let out a sigh and no longer had the mood to stay. They unfolded their yuan wings and flew towards Luo Shui. How could boss leave without saying goodbye? If the Zhanyuan mansion and Murong Zijuan did not find out about this trip to the northern frontier, it would be fine. Once he was discovered, he would definitely be killed. But he had already left, so there was no point in saying anything more. Fortunately, he had the second master and an emperor-level beauty by his side. In the northern borderline, at the border between Daliao and northern Yen, there was an ancient city called Lingtai City. In essence, Lingtai City belonged to Daliao, but in reality, Daliao could not completely control it. Therefore, many northern Yen warriors were stirring up trouble here. 3 days later, the old demon brought Qin Hao and Vivian to the outskirts of Lingtai. This was Qin Hao's request. The ancient city of Lingtai was very large and seemed to have existed for a long time. It was the largest city closest to western Liang. Secondly, if the old demon went any deeper, he would alert the northern borderline warriors above the supremacy level. To avoid unnecessary trouble, he chose to stay here. Thank you for your hard work. Qin Hao thanked the old demon, who had consumed a lot of energy and whose face was a little pale. How was it not hard to work for Master? The old demon thought that this was what he should do, and immediately looked excited. Little Master, what should we do next? Looking at the old demon's behavior, he could not help but want to cause trouble as soon as he arrived at the northern frontier. Go. From now on, you are you, and I am me. You are no longer my man, and you don't have to continue being my slave. Qin Hao suddenly became cold, and his dark eyes became deeper. The old demon felt a chill in his heart. He was caught off guard and asked subconsciously, "Did I do something wrong?" No. Qin Hao shook his head and pressed his hand on the old demon's shoulder. You have done too much for me. Others don't know about my past, but you and Wei Wei know best. I don't want to implicate you. The future is unknown and full of hardships. You are the Blood Emperor, and you can't be held hostage by contract. So from now on, the master-servant contract will be nullified. I will hand over your remnant soul and return you your complete freedom. As he spoke, Qin Hao was ready to destroy the heaven and earth contract between the two of them. Ha ha ha! The old demon laughed. Master, you don't have to. How can I, the Blood Emperor, Su Yongfu's promise be held hostage by contract? Forgive me for being blunt, but even if you destroy the contract, the old demon's promise will not change. In this life, Qin Hao is my only master. In other words, he could not recognize him, but he would still serve him as his master. The old demon was not a fool. He had seen too many miracles from Qin Hao. If a mortal could become a god, Qin Hao would be the first, and the old demon might be the second. Okay, since you have said so, I will look down on you if I continue to be ruthless. But you still have to go. Qin Hao pulled a long face. What? This time, the old demon did not agree. They had just arrived at Beijiang, and it was a great opportunity to show off. The second master could not wait any longer. You are a silly single dog. Can't you see? Do you want me and Wei Wei to be lovey-dovey and stuff a bunch of dog food in your mouth? Then you will understand what it means to be engraved in your heart. Qin Hao was a bit impatient. He had finally gotten rid of everyone and had time to be alone with Wei Wei. How could he allow the old demon to be a third wheel? Wei Wei could not help but laugh. Where did you learn this from? You were never like this in the past. In the past, that Wei Wei was talking about was Qin Hao's past life. However, Vivian was also very cooperative. As she spoke, she hugged Qin Hao's waist tightly and leaned her head against his chest. She winked at the old monster with her big, watery eyes, which seemed to be able to speak, and teased him with a smile. Aya, you are blinding the second master's dog eyes. Heavens, earth, where is my wife? The old demon covered his face with both hands. He was hit 10,000 times. He turned into a dark shadow and flew into the void. Then, the shadow disappeared in the direction of western Liang. He finally left. Qin Hao let out a sigh of relief. If he did not let the old demon, a venerable realm expert, come with him, his parents would not let him go so easily. All of this was Qin Hao's way of comforting his parents. Hao, are you sure you don't want the second master to come with you? At this time, Wei Wei was nervous. In fact, chasing the old demon away was not because he was afraid that he would disturb the two of them. It was because Wei Wei was about to go into seclusion to refine the light of judgment into a primordial spirit. The light of judgment was very strong, and it was not easy to refine it. When the war with the three tribes started, Wei Wei delayed the refining to protect Qin Hao's safety. She wanted to see him destroy the three tribes so that she could be at ease. Now that Qin Hao used the Great Void Cauldron, the power of the light of judgment was greatly limited. He could let Wei Wei absorb it gradually. The absorption process was very slow. No matter what happened to Qin Hao, even if his life was in danger, Wei Wei would not be able to sense it. At that moment, her soul would be completely integrated into the light of judgment. Inside, as for when she would wake up, she could not guarantee. Qin Hao chased away the old demon, but in reality, he was alone. How could Wei Wei not be worried? What? You don't even trust me? You dare to question my ability? Qin Hao's face was relaxed as he scratched Wei Wei's nose. Because white hair was too conspicuous, it was too easy to leave an impression in the hearts of others. After he dressed up simply, Qin Hao deliberately twisted his face and changed it slightly. However, even if he had changed, his facial features were still very delicate and pretty, and it still couldn't hide the awe-inspiring and proud temperament he had. Now, I look like an ordinary person living in the northern borderline. Qin Hao chuckled and strode toward the town in front of him. After entering the town, although he attracted the attention of some people, their gazes did not linger on Qin Hao for long before they lost interest. Juchuan Town. That was the name of the town. Its scale was much larger than Qin Hao's hometown, Akita Town, and it was also more prosperous. It showed that the living standards of the people in the northern borderline were indeed higher than those in the western Liang. However, the pedestrians on the road were in a hurry. Although there were many people, the atmosphere was not lively. It was rare to see acquaintances greeting each other. People were only trading daily necessities on the street. Qin Hao also noticed that there were almost no young people in the town. This puzzled Qin Hao. He stopped an old lady who was walking slowly by the side of the road. Old lady, I came from the west. I'm going to the Lingtai ancient city in the north to learn martial arts from a sect. May I know where you... Before he could finish his sentence, Qin Hao felt the ground under his feet tremble. Small pebbles were bouncing around. Then, with a whoosh, a large number of lights flew over from the distance. The speed of the lights was very strong and very fast. Judging from the color of the lights, this group of people was at the saint level. Moreover, they were the weakest mortal saint because the orange light was very weak. However, the old granny was still scared out of her wits. She let out two strange cries and threw away the crutch in her hand. Originally, she was moving one step at a time, 3 inches at a time. However, as the light flew over, she suddenly raised her hands and ran like 2 tires. She left an afterimage in front of Qin Hao and disappeared without a trace. What's going on? Qin Hao stared in the direction where the old lady disappeared. He did not react for a moment. Young man, why aren't you running? Forget it. Let's go hide in my shop. At this time, a middle-aged man anxiously ran over from a bun shop on the opposite street. He grabbed Qin Hao's arm and pulled him into the shop. He quickly ordered his son to close the door. Child, quickly close the door. Oh. The middle-aged man's son was about 15 or 16 years old. He looked quite smart and quickly closed the window. Then, he picked up wooden planks and arranged them tightly around the shop's door. However, it was already too late. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The light flew over and landed, revealing figures. Chapter 862. Seeing that he couldn't stop them, Old Liang's heart ached. However, Qin Hao was innocent. He hurriedly pointed at Qin Hao and explained, "Lord Qin Shu, you can take my son away, but this child of mine is not from our family. However, this child is not a member of my Liang family at all. Please let him go." "Why are you talking so much nonsense?" A disciple of the Song family was furious. He kicked Uncle Liang. Uncle Liang was already injured. His body smashed through the wall and fell in a rundown bun shop. His sternum collapsed. He struggled for a while, but before he could get up, he died. "Father!" Liang Xiaoxi cried desperately. His eyes were bloodshot. He bit the disciple of the Song family beside him. The disciple who was escorting Liang Xiaoxi loosened his grip in pain. Liang Xiaoxi ran back into the house and knelt in front of Uncle Liang. Creak! Qin Hao secretly clenched his fists. Although he had only met this Uncle Liang once, the other party had died in order to save him. In the end, he disregarded his son's safety and defended Qin Hao. No matter what the Song family's background was, Qin Hao already had the intention to kill them. "However, senior brother Qin Shu, I came from the West. I've long heard of the Song family's name. Actually, I came to Ling Tai's territory specifically to join the Song family." Qin Hao restrained his killing intent and tried his best to put on a smiling face. He walked in front of Song Qin Shu. He could kill the Song family, but he couldn't implicate Liang Xiaoxi. Therefore, Qin Hao decided to trick the Song family first. "Oh, you came here specifically because of the Song family's reputation. You sure know how to talk." Song Qin Shu nodded and praised him. Everyone was willing to listen to good words. "So, senior brother Qin Shu, I should be your junior brother now, right?" Qin Hao said in a low voice. "Tisk. Why don't you take a piss and look at your own face?" However, this caused the other disciples of the Song family to roll their eyes and mock them. "You have a sweet mouth. You're quite likable. But do you think it's that easy to become an official disciple of the Song family?" Song Qin Shu rarely spoke. Today, for some reason, standing in front of Qin Hao, he actually felt a sense of accomplishment. Hence, he began to talk nonstop. "Then how can I become an official disciple of the Song family?" Qin Hao asked again. "One look and I can tell that you're not a local. Locals are afraid of our Song family, but you're actually so interested. Since I've caught the two of you today, I've completed my mission. I'll kindly explain it to you." Song Qin Shu said. As for why he wanted to capture them, he did not say the reason. He simply told Qin Hao that, after arriving at the Song family, he had to undergo a test to see if he had the aptitude for cultivation. Those with extraordinary aptitude would become official disciples and soar to the heavens. Those with low aptitude would only have the life of a servant. Servants had no status in the Song family. Their lives were cheap. Even if they accidentally broke a bowl or said something wrong in front of the disciples who served them, they might lose their lives. "I think you're quite good at talking. Even if you can't become an official disciple, as long as you do your job well, you'll be rewarded with some superficial cultivation techniques. For ordinary people like you, it's a rare opportunity." Song Qin Shu said proudly. Although he was confused, Qin Hao understood how to become an official disciple. "In that case, I'll risk my life and definitely won't embarrass senior brother Qin Shu. I'll definitely try my best to pass." Qin Hao's face was solemn as he vowed. "Ha ha! If you can really become a member of my sect, I'll also receive a reward from the family. Don't worry, as long as you pass the test, I'll definitely take care of you." Song Qin Shu was very happy. "Thank you, senior brother. I can't wait to become a disciple of the Song family. Let's hurry up and leave. It's just that I think this Liang kid is too useless. Look at his eyes. He can't wait to kill you. Why don't we just leave him here? Anyway, his aptitude is definitely not as high as mine." Qin Hao had seen too many open and covert struggles between the disciples of the sect. Uncle Liang only had this one child left. Qin Hao definitely couldn't let Song Qin Shu take him away. Otherwise, it would be difficult for Liang Xiaoxi to survive in the sect. However, these words were too hurtful, especially to Liang Xiaoxi. Moreover, Liang Xiaoxi's father had died. At this moment, his eyes were fixed on the kitchen knife on the table. Blue veins were crawling on his forehead. He really wanted to pick up the kitchen knife and chop Qin Hao and Song Qing into meat paste. No, whether he's a waste or not, I have to take him away. Song Qing didn't agree. There were too many disciples in the sect, and there was a serious shortage of people to serve them. Senior brother Qing, I'm already your junior brother. Why can't you give me some face? Qin Hao said hurriedly. Who the hell do you think you are? You haven't even become one of our official disciples, and you're already sucking up to senior brother Qing. Moreover, what kind of face do you have? At this time, a disciple of the Song family walked over. Perhaps he was jealous that Qin Hao was fawning on Song Qing, and he slapped Qin Hao's face. Qin Hao frowned immediately. He endured it again and again. He endured it again and again. If he endured it any longer, he would be slapped in the face. Suddenly, a force rushed out of his body. Before the disciple's slap landed, Qin Hao was about to break the rope on his body. But all of a sudden, bang, 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 several streams of light blasted up and sent the group of disciples of the Song family around Song Qing flying. The disciple who slapped Qin Hao immediately stopped his hand in midair and subconsciously looked behind him. People of the Song family, you've gone too far in bullying our Lingyun school, haven't you? You've repeatedly abducted people in our sect's territory. Do you really think that our Lingyun school doesn't exist? Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Another group of disciples of the sect appeared in front of Qin Hao. The second group of people was wearing the same light blue clothes, and their bow ties were white. Ling Xiaoxue. Song Qing turned around with a shocked expression. Standing in front of him was a dignified woman with delicate features. She was about 20 years old and had a heroic face. However, her complexion was too pale and gave people the feeling that she was ill. She was the direct disciple of the current sect master of the Lingyun school and had the cultivation of a profound sage. She was a full realm higher than Song Qing. Following this, more than a dozen disciples of the Lingyun school who had rushed over had already surrounded the Song family. Song Qingshu's face began to sweat, and the corners of his eyes trembled subconsciously. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Whoosh, whoosh. The ropes binding Qin Hao and Liang Xiaoxi were automatically untied. In front of Ling Xiaoxue, it would be difficult for Song Qingshu to take them away. "Miss Ling, he killed my father. Please, please avenge my father. I'm willing to be your slave and work for the Lingyun school. I'm begging you." Liang Xiaoxi couldn't help but burst into tears. She knelt at Ling Xiaoxue's feet. "Senior sister, the Song family is big and powerful. We can't take them away," a disciple of the Lingyun school whispered. The Lingyun school and the Song family had been enemies for a long time. However, the sect had declined and was no longer a match for the other party. This time, stopping them from taking people away had deepened their hatred. If they killed Song Qingshu, it would be like pouring oil on the fire. At that time, the Song family would be furious and would definitely destroy the entire Lingyun school. Hee, it's fine as long as you know what you have. To be honest, I'm only letting you take them away because of Song Xiang. Otherwise, even if I take them away by force, what can Ling Xiaoxue do to me? Song Qingshu suddenly turned around and smiled contemptuously at Ling Xiaoxue. He waved a finger in front of his nose and said, "You, Ling Xiaoxue, don't have the right to touch me, and don't provoke me. You're not qualified. If you provoke me, even if Song Xiang is here, he won't dare to say anything. Even if I don't do anything, how long can Ling Xiaoxue live?" Once you enter my Lingyun school, you have to behave yourself. If you don't blame me for cleaning up the school. Come back with me to the sect to take the test and see how your aptitude is. Then, we'll decide whether you'll be an inner or outer disciple. Ling Xiaoxue looked at Qin Hao and raised her hand, preparing to take him back. "Eldest miss, please take me with you. My father is dead. I want to practice martial arts to avenge him. Please let me join Lingyun school," Liang Xiaoxi said anxiously. Okay, you can come back with us to take the test. Go and bury your father first. Ling Xiaoxue sighed and shook her head. She instructed two disciples to help bury Uncle Liang, and then walked to a secluded corner to wait. It didn't take long for Uncle Liang to be buried. Liang Xiaoxi took out a few pieces of silver from his house. It was no more than 5 taels at most. It wasn't much, but his father had worked hard to sell buns and saved it all his life for him and his elder brother to marry a wife. But his elder brother was already dead. Other than the 5 taels of silver, Liang Xiaoxi didn't bring anything else. Uncle, don't worry. From today onwards, I won't let your son be bullied at all. Moreover, I'll nurture him into a talent and make him an expert. Qin Hao said in his heart. He bowed 3 times in front of Uncle Liang's grave, and then returned with Liang Xiaoxi to find Ling Xiaoxue. Who are you pretending for? Don't think that I'll forgive you just because of this. On the way, Liang Xiaoxi mocked and ridiculed Qin Hao. When he returned, he advised Ling Xiaoxue not to accept Qin Hao into the Ling Yun school. He felt that Qin Hao could betray them at any time and was not worthy of being a disciple of the Ling Yun school. Liang Xiaoxi looked down on Qin Hao from the bottom of his heart. Ling Xiaoxue knew this too. However, the sect was too short of people. Even if Qin Hao's character was not good and his qualifications were not good, she had to take a gamble in order to achieve good results in the Imperial Martial Arts competition a year later and revive the sect. Otherwise, the Ling Yun school would really be buried in her hands. Qin Hao did not know that the Imperial Martial Arts competition in Beijiang was actually held for Shaohan. This was also the reason why the Song family went around arresting people. Ling Yun school. It was not in Ling Yun City. However, for those who were born with superior conditions, coupled with hard work, their achievements would definitely be higher. In terms of selecting disciples, the northern borderline sects were indeed much more advanced than Western Liang. This was enough to prove everything from the stone slabs. I'll go first. Liang Xiaoxi was very excited and was the first to stand up. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The jade-colored stone slab under his feet reacted. Wisps of white energy wrapped around his body. Immediately, a blue light spread out from Liang Xiaoxi's body. The blue light shrank a few times before turning orange with a buzz. This indicated that Liang Xiaoxi's future limit should be the sage grade. Based on the intensity of the light, it was relatively thin. Thus, it could be concluded that it was a mortal sage. Congratulations, junior brother. You have the qualifications to become a disciple of the sect. You are now one of us. The disciples in the courtyard congratulated Liang Xiaoxi one after another. Although the Ling Yun school had declined and its numbers had dwindled, the respect and love between fellow disciples was far from what the disciples of the big sect and big family clans could compare to. Yes, very good. You are a child of an ordinary family, yet you possess a mortal sage constitution. How rare. Even Ling Xiaoxue couldn't help but praise him. She was very happy that the sect had finally succeeded in recruiting a new disciple. Normally, Liang Xiaoxi might have been proud of himself. However, at the moment, he couldn't help but lower his head and clench his fists until they turned pale. How could a mere mortal sage defeat Song Qingshu? How could he avenge his father? Although Song Qingshu was also a mortal sage, he was a disciple of a big family and had a lot of resources. Whether it was pills to change one's physique or high-grade cultivation techniques, Liang Xiaoxi couldn't compare to them. Don't be depressed. Your fate is in your own hands. As long as you are willing to work hard and cultivate, you might be able to break through your limits and become a profound sage or even a sky sage. Qin Hao put his hand on Liang Xiaoxi's shoulder, his eyes full of encouragement. At the same time, a wisp of yuan qi flowed from his palm into Liang Xiaoxi's body. That's right. As long as you work harder, you might be able to surpass Song Qingshu. Liang Xiaoxi seemed to have been enlightened. His depressed mood suddenly became clear. Then, he realized that it was Qin Hao who was standing beside him. His face tightened, and he slapped Qin Hao away. Why do you care? Go away. Buzz. But suddenly, the light on Liang Xiaoxi's body changed again. At this moment, his feet were still standing on the jade slab. The dim light that enveloped his body suddenly became stronger. The thin orange color seemed to have been hit by a tsunami. With a whoosh, it turned into a turbulent red energy. Oh my God, you on Monarch physique. Is it real? Chapter 866. Even so, Ling Xiaoxue was already very happy. Liang Xiaoxi's potential was much stronger than hers. The sect had a successor. My spiritual strength is at level 12. I will definitely become an Yuan monarch within 10 years and avenge my father. Song Qing just you wait. Liang Xiaoxi's confidence was boosted. He retracted his hand proudly and sneered as he looked at Qin Hao. Qin Hao remained silent as he put his hand into the groove of the soul testing stone. All the disciples immediately widened their eyes and stared at him intently. They wondered if there would be another strange phenomenon this time. However, they were disappointed. There was no strange phenomenon. When Qin Hao put his hand into the groove, the soul testing stone shot out a beam of light, indicating that his spiritual strength was at level 3. Level 3 spiritual strength was at the peak of the Yuan Master Realm. It was undeniably mediocre. Even if Qin Hao worked extremely hard, it was impossible for him to become a Yuan Master before he turned 50. Although it's 30% destiny and 70% hard work, sometimes hard work alone is useless. Otherwise, what's the point of having a genius? The disciple who encouraged Qin Hao was also discouraged. He sighed and patted Qin Hao's shoulder. Qin Hao still had a smile on his face, as if it had nothing to do with him. Since Ling Xiaoxue said that he could join the Ling Yun school, he did not care about anything else. Xiaoxue, what happened? Did the great emperor come to our Ling Yun school, personally? Suddenly, a solemn voice came from the courtyard. The sect leader of the Ling Yun school, Ling Quan, stepped in anxiously. Greetings, sect leader. Greetings, sect leader. The disciples bowed one after another. Ling Quan waved his hand as his gaze fell on Ling Xiaoxue. Grandfather, the great emperor did not come to our Ling Yun school personally. Actually, this is what happened. Ling Xiaoxue pointed at Qin Hao, then pointed at Liang Xiaoxi, and told them what had happened. You scared me. So that's how it is. What a pity. Ling Quan shook his head at Qin Hao, full of disappointment. Soon after, his eyes lit up as he looked at Liang Xiaoxi passionately. Yuan King Constitution, level 12 spiritual strength. Very good, a very good seedling. From today onwards, you are the second direct disciple of the old man. You have been promoted to an elite of the cabinet. I will prepare all the resources you need for your cultivation in the Cloud Hall, including elixirs and cultivation methods. I will personally guide you. Thank you, Master. Liang Xiaoxi was flattered and quickly knelt down to acknowledge him as his master. He knew that from today onwards, his life would be different. Finally, he followed Ling Quan to the top of the mountain. However, when he reached the door, he suddenly turned his head and pointed his little finger at Qin Hao.